Good evening, everyone. The time is now 6:30. I'd like to commence tonight's Board of Selectmen, Select Board hearing, meeting on Monday, April 3rd, 2023, held here in the Walkway Meeting Room at Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, Mashpee, Massachusetts, 02649. Broadcast live on local cable channel 18, streamed live on the Town of Mashpee website, and we'll convene in open session. I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'd like to take a moment of silence. Past weeks, there's been shootings in schools and things of that nature, and today I just received word that we also lost our chief. He was 100 years old, a World War II veteran, and it's a great loss for the tribe, the town, and everyone that, all the lives that he touched over his 100 years. Thank you. I'd accept a motion to approve the Monday, March 20th, 2023, regular and executive session meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom? Michaela?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. That motion is unanimously approved and passes unanimously. Do we have, so we'll go into public comment, and I only have one person signed up here. I have to assume everyone else in the room is here for the public hearings, and you'll have time to speak at that time. Mary Wagon?
Thank you, David.
evening.
And I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank
He
you.
was a great man. Good evening. My name is Mary Wagon, and I live at 35 Ashumet Road. I'm representing myself here tonight and not the Planning Board or the Community Preservation Committee. And I'm here to comment tonight on the discussion regarding the nitrogen credits for 474 Main Street, 31 Ashumet Road. I'm a butter to that property. And I'm sure that you'll have lots to discuss about this unique proposal. I just wanted to introduce a few concepts to you that you might consider as in case you go forward with it. So I looked at the meeting packet tonight, and there doesn't seem to be any conceptual plans about what this project would look like. So that's something you might want to consider before you take a final vote on this project. It's cited that this would be a Chapter 40B comprehensive permit, which would give the town very little control about architectural standards and site design. But if the town ends up providing some type of value to this project, you could condition that transfer of property rights, that nitrogen credit, with something like, oh, we want to see your conceptual plans, or we want Cape Cod-style architecture for this site. We want to look at a site design. We want superior landscaping. Because I know what works in affordable housing is that you make it look nice. You make it look nice, nobody thinks it's affordable housing, right? The other thing is, I think they can have 9 bedrooms there at the site right now, and they're looking to increase that to 32. Chapter 40B would require 25% of those units be affordable. Since the town is going to, if you go forward with this, and the town provides something to this project, you might want to say, well, the next 25% we want to be workforce housing. Right? Not just affordable to 80% of the area median income, but something in that range, 80% to 120% of the area median income. Or you could say something like, well, that initial lease up of 25% of those units, not the affordable units, but the next 25% could be, has to be somebody that works in Mashpee, right, for that local workforce thing. Okay, you know I love vegetated buffers, parking lots in the rear. We saw that that worked with the Christ the King development when they put the solar carports in their property. So you wanted, that ended up being extremely important. Lastly, I think because the proposal involves town-owned land, you may need a town meeting vote on that because you're designating the use of the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, the time's now 6:35. We're going to go into the public hearing on the new aquaculture grant application, which is for 1.98 acres over in Walkwhite Bay. Jamie Pacheco, is he present? If you could come to the mic. Clerk, could you read the public notice, hearing notice?
Certainly would.
Thank you.
Pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 130, Section 57 and 60, the Mashpee Select Board will hold public hearing on the application filed on November 30th, 2022 by Jamie Piccolo
Pacheco.
correct?
sir.
Pacheco.
Pacheco, yes, sir.
and at 174 Lowell Road, number 51, Mashpee, Mass. 02649, for the new shellfish aquaculture license, shellfish grants for an 1.98 acre site to be located at Wacoit Bay to grow oysters, cohogs, bay scallops with bottom gear. The application and plans for the proposed license area are on file at the Mashpee Select Board Office, Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Cove, Mashpee, Northborough, Mashpee, Massachusetts. Shellfish aquaculture grant application, Wacoit Bay, 1.98 acres. Said hearing will be held tonight at Mashpee.
Thank you for that. Do you want to give you opportunity to just give just for the record, a quick overview of your project? We all have the packet, but just for public awareness?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Jamie Pacheco. I'm a commercial shellfishman and resident of Mashpee. My proposal is here, which I thank Ashley and Chris again. They were very helpful with me putting this together, a lot more computer savvy than I am, so I got to thank them again for that. I'm looking to acquire a 1.98 acre shellfish aquaculture site in Wacoit Bay, just off of Secaucet Island. The gear I'm hoping to use is just strictly bottom gear. It's they call them condos or hotel-style cages. They're about the size of this table, a little shorter. They sit on the bottom. You put the oysters in them, and they grow from seed when you buy them to full term. So you won't be seeing those big, ugly black rafts floating on top, causing any hazards to boats or any paddleboards or kayakers. It's just going to be all under the water on the bottom. I'm also hoping to plant cohogs on the bottom sand, just like we do, everywhere else. You throw them out, they grow, bury themselves, and grow. And then I'm hoping down the road to actually experiment with scallops. I've been told by some of the other local farmers that they would probably do well in that area. So getting scallops in the ponds gets more spat in the ponds. Maybe we actually see some more scallop growth in Wacoit Bay. If you flip forward, I got some maps here for the rest of the public who can't see it. The place I'm looking to put the site is if you're coming out of Great and Little River, to the right there's that osprey nest off the point there. Just around the other side of the point off of that beach, it's privately owned, is where I want the site. It's nice, flat, about waist deep water. Not a lot of boat traffic at all because it's too shallow for the boats to go in. Nobody beaches their boats there because it's privately owned. So it'll be out of the way. It won't be causing any issues there. So again, I'll just be using the bottom gear there, the cohogs there. I've already gone to the Waterways Committee and pitched this to them, and they voted in approval, as well as the Shellfish Committee. They did as well. I also have a letter of support from the Harbor Master guaranteeing that it's not causing any hazards, it's not in a mooring field. I have looked over the site myself as well as Ashley surveyed to make sure there's no natural growth there. It's not a site with eelgrass. It's not a site that Ashley and Chris plant shellfish, so I think it's not going to cause any issues there as well. I did sit down and speak with Joel Carden, who is the private owner of that beach. He owns that whole 0.6 acres there, and he is all in approval as well. I sat down at his house, me and Chris and the harbor master, Bob, to answer any questions he had on it, and he was in full support. So,
Thank you for that. Nice job on the application. It looks well thought out.
thank you.
At this time, I'd like to first open it up to members of the board for questions. Does any members of the board have questions for Mr. Pacheco?
I don't have any questions, but if it's Chris and Ashley approved, and I like the project myself, I'm good.
And I know the area.
No.
I live right around.
I'm fine.
Nice.
I agree with approval from everybody. It makes sense to me.
Couple of questions that I had. So is the aquaculture permit that you're applying for, is that area in a designated family or commercial fishing area?
No, sir.
It's not at all?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. On the application, I did see on page 2, is there a proposed grant site located within an area of critical environmental concern? The answer was yes.
Yes.
And if Ashley or somebody could speak to, how that's typically factored in when there's a yes. Usually, most applications, if it's a yes, then you have to explain how that affects your decision. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at, because the application doesn't allow for further explanation when answering yes.
Yeah, so we did reach out to the Division of Marine Fisheries in regards to the area of critical environmental concern, which is encompassing all of Wacoya Bay. It just takes, it's an extra level of permitting that he's going to need to go through as far as altering the bottom is what they're concerned about, and as far as affecting eelgrass beds, which there are none left. And the last known eelgrass is in Sage Lot, so we're okay there. We're just going to work closely with the division and getting him permitted, and we can help him along with that process. But it is an extra hurdle that the applicant will need to take.
Okay, and then as a follow-up, the same thing for the next question was, is the proposed grant site located within the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Project, map habitat? And the answer was yes on that one as well? Same answer?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. That's pretty much all I had. So was there anything else you want to add as the Natural Resources Department? to
Just that
speak on this?
we know that the area isn't heavily commercially fished. It's very rocky bottom. Nothing's set there in a number of years, and I have gone over it personally with Bull Rake, and I haven't found anything significant. We will have the Division of Marine Fisheries come out on an on-site visit for sediment testing. They'll look at the sediment type and whether it's suitable, as well as the shellfish seed stock in the area. So they'll take an additional look at the area and their permitting requirements.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to open it up to the public. Is there any questions of the public of this project? Arden, if you could come to the podium.
Hi, Arden Russell, 32 Sturgis Lane. I looked at the application, and I'm just wondering why there's no business plan requirement associated with these applications. We might be giving away this grant area to an applicant. I know nothing about him, but we don't know that he can implement this plan. Does he have funding for all the equipment that he needs, and storage locations, and boating, and seed? He might not be able to implement this idea, and then we don't actually have the benefits of using this site. So, I just think that's a really extra piece of information that would be important to this board before they gave away this opportunity. Thank you.
I know, Jamie, you could probably answer that on your own, but he has been a commercial fisherman for a number of years. He owns his own vessel. He plans on using the Great River launch for his removal of his harvest for sale. And I mean, we don't see a problem. We take a look at every single one of the applicants' as they come before us and make sure that they're qualified, they're skilled in the profession, and that they're able to carry through with the grant.
As much as I do appreciate the question, you know, in my personal job, I do see a lot of these. I don't know where it's actually required of any, in any town. I understand the theory behind the reasoning behind the question, and, you know, but at the same time, I would think that like a full business plan, you might be giving away proprietary information to the success of your, and competitive advantage of your project to have a business plan involved in a public hearing. So I don't know if I would require that as much as maybe, you know, just showing that requesting it through the application process kind of credentials to kind of validate your years of experience and your professional capability of executing the proposed project. That might be something to amend the application and ask just to have it as incorporated into the package
Okay.
and for future.
Okay. And the Mashpee Shellfish regulations, we do require a minimum production value, so we do babysit, if you will, new applications and in their first year to make sure that they're meeting that production value and that they're actually investing in the site, that they're permitted through the town. So that is a requirement. And their plans, as submitted with their gear proposed and bottom placement, is, in all intents and purposes, considered a business plan.
One last question, I guess, would be, you know, should the project discontinue? Is there language in any sort of commitments that would require you to fully restore the area, remove all equipment, and leave it as you found it? Is there language to that effect, commitments?
Yeah, they're currently in the Mashpee Shellfish regulations.
Okay. I'm good. So are there any other comments of the general public on this project? Hearing none, I'd open it up to the board one last time.
Good.
Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? None. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. This public hearing is closed. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the permit application for the 1.9 acre aquaculture grant in Walkwhite Bay being applied for Jamie Pacheco.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well.
Good
Your
luck.
project's been approved, and good luck with your project.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you, you too. Next item on the agenda is the discussion and possible approval. Already did that, sorry. Presentation and update on opioid abatement funds and application process. Human Services Director Gail Wilson.
Hi, good
Welcome.
evening. Good evening. On July 21st, 2021, Attorney General Maura Healey announced a $26 billion settlement with pharmaceutical distributors Cardinal, McKesson, Amerisource, Virgin, as well as Johnson & Johnson for their manufacturing and marketing of opioids. The town of Mashpee will be receiving a total of $727,313 over a period of 17 years from this settlement. Currently, the town has received $152,956, for which we have developed an application for funding to reach those agencies and groups who work with Mashpee residents in the areas of treatment, recovery, harm reduction, and education. We hope to get this application to the public later this month, and we have a 3-member panel that will be reviewing the applications as they come in. with later approval by the Human Services Committee. Corinne Wickel is on the panel and will speak about the application process.
Good evening, everyone. So we have, the three-person panel has decided to have the applications available twice a year. As Gail said, we hope to have it available this month with a deadline of June 1st and funds to be dispersed in the fiscal year July 1st after approval at town meeting in May. And then the second round of application will be November 1st with a deadline of November 1st with a disbursement December 1st. And those will be, like I said, twice a year. And then each year, it just depends on how much the town receives as what is dispersed based on the requirements and the recommendations and the outline of treatment.
In the four areas.
In the four areas.
Treatment, harm recovery, and education.
And prevention.
Any members of the board have questions?
I'm
or
here for
concern?
also commenting on this.
So Lynn Barbie is the chair of our Human Services Committee, and she wanted to speak briefly about the role that the Human Services Committee will play, which currently has 6 members.
Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you, Lynn Barbie, Chair of the Human Services Committee. Many of you know that I believe in visual aids, so I brought something along for you all to see. It is a sample of Narcan, which I borrowed from our colleagues at the AIDS support group. I just want to tell a very brief story. I spent my sophomore year in high school at a town in Arlington, Virginia, and I went to Wakefield High School. And a couple months ago, I was fixing dinner and watching ABC News, and it came on the news, Wakefield High School in Arlington, Virginia, that a 14-year-old student had been found dead from an overdose of fentanyl in the school bathroom. And I still feel this. It was very, very, very difficult, very shocking. But that is the reality that we face, whether it's suburban or small town or big city. And I just want to say that after the head of the Human Services there said that they have a group that's working on this, and that one of the things that they're doing is harm reduction strategies, which is for a lot of people to carry Narcan. I just briefly also want to say that in the Sunday Globe, there was a man who wrote an article about his son dying suddenly of an overdose of fentanyl, and he makes the following comments of what we can do. Make Narcan, also known generically by its drug name as naloxone, as ubiquitous as fentanyl, 1. 2, make fentanyl test strips available. 3, start drug awareness education early. 4, talk to your kids. And I just want to say, I think our town is really blessed to have the benefit of Gail and all the work she does, and Corinne and the task force and all the work that they do. And we on the committee will work as hard as we can to make sure that we don't have those same kind of incidents. We will get the money out to the groups that are doing the work in the community and support them. And it's a prevention, harm reduction, recovery, and treatment. That's what they said. And I just want to thank you all for your support in this. And I urge everybody to keep listening to this. We've sort of got away from listening to the opioid crisis because of COVID and all of that, but it's still very real out there, and I thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. One question I had was, it does say, third bullet from the bottom on the first page of the handout, agencies or group must have an organizational structure with a minimum of a 501c3 status. So is the funding application only for nonprofits, or is there funding available for municipal ran programs and, our schools to do kind of drug prevention programs as well?
Yeah, we hope that the school will apply for the funding if they see needed.
Town manager?
I don't know if that's the
Answer.
answer
Oh, okay.
that you were looking for.
Well, I mean, the 501c3
Yeah, I guess I'm
requirement
confused
sounds
by the
very,
question.
sounds very specific. I'm not sure if the school falls in that criteria or not as a extension of the town. So I don't know,
So-
having that, is that a requirement
So
of
let
the
me,
state?
yeah, let me explain a little further, I
Okay.
guess, to clarify that. If the school, sometimes the schools can connect with outside agencies to implement programming, so as long as they're a 501c3, I just want to clarify, that they would fall under this, if that makes sense.
So they're not eligible for direct funding, it's to be used as a pass-through?
I'm not sure if the school itself within there, did we talk about that?
Well,
address
that's,
that?
you bring up a good point, because we didn't talk about the schools specifically being ineligible because they're not a 501c3. The reason why we put that language in there was to help, I guess, I'm going to say narrow the field, but just so there wasn't like everybody. You had to be an organized structure providing services to people who live in Mashpee. You don't have to be an organized structure in Mashpee, but you have to provide services. That's the criteria that we came up with, so that we just weren't flooded with requests, because every town is going to have monies available. So organizations throughout the Cape are going to be, or throughout the state actually, are going to be able to apply for these funds. Different towns are doing it differently. But the school question is something that, I guess maybe perhaps we have to look at.
Well,
Just-
along those
just
same
to
lines,
reply,
it seems like
Chair.
even the Human Services Group couldn't apply directly for funding to do programming or anything if they're not a 501c3. So with respect to the town's organizational structure,
If I can address that.
Yes, ma'am.
There are organizations who do work who are for-profit, and whether it's, recovery, whatever. And there are many, there are good organizations who are for-profit, but we wanted to make sure that the nonprofit groups are the ones that are getting this money, because those are the ones that are currently, our Human Services Committee has grants to a number of organizations, and they're nonprofits. And we wanted to be able to keep that consistent, and it'd be, as Corinne was saying, to limit and there's lots of good nonprofit groups. And I think that, that we'll see if we need to evolve this in some way at this point. But I think the idea is that there are different nonprofit groups that can make a contract with the school and go into the school and provide whatever they are asking for, as well as being able to do work in the community. So I think the schools will have plenty of ability to benefit from this money. But if we need to evolve it,
Right, I think
we
just
will.
to add, I think we had to start somewhere with a structure,
Right.
because we want to make sure that we're getting data back to show that Mashpee residents are being served.
Right.
And so we want to have some sort of a structure, so there's a reporting system that
Right.
we can make sure that this money is going to where it needs to desperately go.
so I guess, moving forward, just, I know, Town Manager, you had a question or comment. Just moving forward, it'd be good for the board to kind of look at, a strategic plan on kind of how this develops, and, if it's going to be annual funding, kind of, just for awareness purposes, understand your strategy as to implementation and utilizing the funding moving forward. Town Manager?
The only thing I just wanted to add is, many months ago, I came before the board, and you gave me the authorization to seek this litigation. And through town council, there was a lot of consultation. And I'd be remiss tonight if I didn't thank the police department and the fire department for the data that provided a lot of the crossing of the Ts and the dotting of the Is for us to receive this type of money.
Thank you for
A
that.
lot of work that went into this.
I'm sure. No, I don't want to sound unappreciative. It was just something that jumped out at me, and want to make sure that it's not, too restrictive for.
Prevention is so key, so we hope that we can reach as many people as possible.
And I think the school systems are in a unique place to, try and prepare the kids to deal with all that life throws at them, and, want to maximize that resource wherever possible. Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This
If
doesn't
I may,
require any action, does it?
Well, we'd like to vote to approve this,
Oh,
this application process. It did go through town council. We've gone through the process with Human Services to make sure they were on board with this.
Town council.
Corinne and Gail and myself have worked diligently on this to get it done. And while you're saying it may be some tweaking that you'd like to see going forward, I have no problem with that. But I want to get this approved. We've got money being put up in May's town meeting to be approved so that in July, we can start feeding those personal groups. It doesn't mean that we're going to cut out anybody. I think we just needed a structure to have them identify what they've done for Mashpee residents with this funding. So by having a 501c or something with a structure, we were able to get that money back. I don't think we were looking to eliminate the school from applying, or the town, for that matter. But I think we needed to have something in place so we can get these funds into the public hands as quickly as we can to get some type of progress towards the opioid and addictions and education and all that goes with that. So I'd just like approval to go forward with this. We will certainly bring you any updates as we see problems, or as you do. Please bring them to us, and we'll be glad to make adjustments if it makes sense.
Duly noted. At this time, I'd accept a motion to approve the opioid abatement fund application as presented by Human Services Director Gail Wilson tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. Application's approved. Do we need to put that on town warrant?
No, the funding for this is on the
on
town
the
meeting
warrant.
warrant.
Right. It's on the-
That, as long as that's approved in May, we'll be able to go forward with this. If it
Gotcha.
isn't, then we can't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing, modification of entertainment license for Barnstable Pizza Company, doing business as Finally Dino's. Clerk, if you could read the announcement.
Will do. The Select Board, acting as the local licensing authority for the town of Mashpee, will conduct a public hearing on Monday, April 3rd, 2023, at 6:45 PM, Coit Meeting Room at Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road, North Mashpee, Mass. 02649. The purpose of said hearing is to consider a modification to the entertainment license of Barnstable Pizza and Pasta Company, Inc., doing business as Finally Dino's. Location at 401 Nathan Ellis Highway to allow for amplified music on the outdoor premise. The public is invited to attend and to present any questions, comments, or concerns they may have pertaining to this license. You may submit comments and questions via email, Boston, Mashpee, mass.gov, prior to the meeting date and time.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you want to give us a rundown on the application and tell us what has changed?
Sure.
My name is Jessica Summer. I'm with the law firm of Dunning Crane in Mashpee, and I'm assisting Dino with this modification. The modification that we're seeking is just the license as it stands allows for acoustic music, which is great. But as stated, we're just asking for amplified sound. Dino can speak specifically to, he's quite the expert in terms of sound. But we feel that there have been, due to, technological shifts, sound efficiency is much, much better than it has been over the years. So that there's going to be less external sound and less problems potentially. But I'll let Dino speak to that.
Good evening. Thank you. In the last, say, 3 or 4 years, the whole world's changed with COVID and everything, and what's happened. And the focus has been, every restaurant in the last few years has been outside. As I've always stated before, we're in the customer service business as well as, as the food business. We have a nice deck. People really enjoy being outside. As I said, it got pushed, and the more people were outside during COVID, the more they wanted to be outside even more. We acknowledge, and I acknowledge, and I have not acknowledged the issues that have occurred with my neighbors. But going forward, I was proposing to, what I put in my application was like as an amplified acoustic, meaning that today's current technology, I don't know if you've noticed, everything is basically on your phone or iPad, and all these entertainers now have what we used to call a drum machine. That's what it used to be called. It's all pre-recorded, pre-ready to go in. The problem before was when you have a 4 or 5 piece band, each instrument, each band member had a speaker, plus the backup speakers, so you're talking about 10 speakers on a 5-piece band, which you can't control the way the sound comes out. It's almost similar as when you have on your radio, when you have a Bluetooth speaker. That is already pre-recorded and is sent out of one speaker. With now, what I'm proposing, and I was explaining now, is that with a 1, 2, or 3 piece, I'm not looking for the big bands and everything else. The vibe's changed outside. The people want to be outside. Everybody wants to relax. We do a great job with the food. We're making a few alterations this year, to upgrade the outside and the menu and everything else, and change the direction of where the entertainers would be, and focus it and push it towards the 151 side. Before, it used to come from 155 back towards the bar, just turn it and going back that way, and basically limiting, how many entertainers we have, and basically work with basically a 2-speaker system that these people have. Usually the big band eras, there aren't that many big bands left anymore, and people it's not the same as it used to be back in the day before COVID and everything else. With a 2-piece, generally speaking, if you go to most restaurants or anywhere, inside, outside, whether it's locally or throughout the Cape, there's usually one person playing the keyboard or guitar or something and the other person singing. And then it all comes out of the same system. They don't have, 2 different things with the mixing board and everything else. So we can direct and control the speaker. Before and then now is we're gearing to play to the space as opposed to before. As I've been doing this for 30, 40 years dealing with bands, is sometimes you just can't control the bands because they keep on turning up the volume, tuning the volume. But with a small system, there's only so much volume can go out. And the technology has gone so well that the equipment has become smaller, everything's become better sounding, everything has been for the better in the sound system. And I think we've done a great job, maintaining the outside in-town community, and just look forward to giving the people what they want, and just have the usual, the usual entertainment. Even before was from 5 to 8, weeknights, and that was it. We never violated any local ordinances. We never violated the sound ordinance of the town of Mashpee. We've never violated, the fire codes. We never violated anything in the 30-plus years we've been here. So I feel like, we deserve at least a chance to, try this and show that this is what the new, world is like on the outside deck and outside restaurants, since over 20% of the restaurants, went away during COVID, and we're all struggling to get, back to where we were. Thank you.
I'd first open it up to members of the board. Any questions for the applicant?
I'll jump on.
Tom?
Dino, always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
Has a long history. I know a lot of people that are here probably don't realize that, and it's been very difficult. You do run a great business. Everything about it, the outside area, especially during the summer months, great place to go. You're great to the community, all of those things. I think your first stop should have been the abutters, the people that you've dealt with them at least twice in the last 5 years. I mean, just going through the process with us. I couldn't vote for you to support until you've gone to the abutters, did a presentation with them, just from my point of view. And that's what I think is important. I mean, everybody would love to give you the opportunity. But whereas these homeowners, and we had the nurse and the children and, the lack of sleep and whatnot. And I really think I would like to see you invite the residents down, try the sound system out, see how it works, see if is there any room for their approval. I mean, if you can do that, I mean, I'd be more than happy to support you. And that's where I stand on this.
Thank you. And if I bring back what happened in the last meeting, is exactly what I proposed for the town and the selectmen to give me the opportunity to do that, and I was shut down by the former chair. I was even given the opportunity to, as I came to the board, the governing board who grants the license and everything else, mediate basically an opportunity to show them the possibility, which the board never gave me. So how can I, if you're the governing board, and how am I going to my neighbors to get approval to do this? I have no problem, doing it. But as I asked you at that meeting a couple of years ago, was give me the opportunity. Let's bring everybody together. Let me show you. But I was denied by the board. So obviously I can't do it if I was denied by the board. No matter what my neighbors and all the other townspeople say, and then, we're talking about less than 1% of the population of Mashpee, less than 1/10% actually, but, when you're the governing board, you should be able to take the initiative and say, listen, all right, let's settle this mediation. Let's settle this with these people. I have nothing personally against all the people. I don't bother anybody in town. And if you didn't grant me the opportunity last 2 years ago, when it was, why won't you just do it right now? I mean, I wanted an opportunity. I tried to bring him into. I tried it 2 years ago, and I was shut down by the former chairman.
Well, you know where I stand,
But I'm willing to do that. But at some point, the board also has to take some sort of initiative and lead and say, all right, let's work this out.
We've heard both sides. We're going to go on to, I believe John had a question?
No, I didn't. I am curious to see, I might have some comments, but I'd be curious to see what the public has to say before I have some input, because there's some questions I have about, I know you mentioned, Dino, you said 5 to 8. Again, that's just you saying it. From my understanding of the permit, this says it's up till 10 p.m.
Yeah.
So if the permit is, if we were to approve it, this would say you could actually play it till 10. So I'm just, the way I read it.
Well,
But-
that wasn't, well, I don't know. I don't know if that's the case or not, because technically, the entertainment licenses should come concurrent with inside and outside, but you can't place restrictions on the outside like you did before. Because even the previous one said I had to stop at 8 o'clock. The town bylaw which I followed to the letter and never violated, said 8 o'clock on Sundays or 10 o'clock. So if if a neighbor of theirs is able to play their music until 10 o'clock at night by town bylaw, why aren't I at least be able to play it till 8 o'clock? Right, so you can have, I can buy the house next door to them, and every Friday and Saturday night, I can just go put a band, and put music, loud music, right next door to them, and just blast it until 10 o'clock, and there's nothing they can do about it. Because it's not a nuisance. I'm trying to be nice and try to, make it so we can, reduce the big band stuff, bring a couple, two pieces out there, play a little music 5 to 8, have a little ambiance, and then just, get on with it. We're not looking to change the world. We're not looking to change. We're just trying to, make everybody get along. And like I said, I have no problem meeting with my neighbors and everything else, but I asked the town, and the board, to mediate 2 years ago, and I was shut down.
Okay, thank you.
One more, if you don't mind. So I am curious, and this is more for the public, if someone is going to speak, I'm assuming you had acoustic going on last year?
Yeah, we didn't do much. Acoustic doesn't do very well.
No, then that's fair. I am curious
You're on
about,
151, you got traffic going everywhere, you could barely hear an acoustic thing, whatever else,
so I am curious if, from the public, if you live and reside close by, was the acoustic an issue? Because if it was, then amplification would be more of a concern. But that's, I'm curious to see what the public has to say.
Okay, so are there any other questions from the board at this time? I'll open it up again, but,
I'd rather hear from the public as well.
okay.
I think John needs to.
So at this time, I'd like to ask if there's any members of the public that have come to speak to this particular issue. Yes, sir, if you come to the podium, state your name for the record and either who you represent or your street address.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Select Board members. My name is TJ Hurry. I'm an attorney with the law offices of Bruce Behrens and Hyannis, and I represent Mary Ann and Duncan Campbell, who are also with me tonight. The Campbells live at 4 Mohican Drive, which is located only a short distance from Dino's itself. As you are aware, as the local licensing authority, you do have a wide range of discretion under Massachusetts general law when making decisions regarding entertainment licenses. And when you take into consideration the history of licensing at Dino's, specifically the outdoor amplified music, together with the letters and emails that have been sent prior to the hearing, as well as the anticipated testimony that you'll hear tonight, we are asking you to deny the current request for outdoor amplified music. The history of issues surrounding outdoor amplified music at Dino's goes back to at least 2014, which includes eliminating the amplified music in 2017 and a subsequent denial before this board in 2021. It is well documented, and I won't go into every detail of that, but I will state that the same issues and concerns remain for my clients as well as their neighbors. Amplified music funnels into their neighborhood. It is loud, it is intrusive, and it disrupts everything from trying to enjoy a nice, peaceful evening or late afternoon in the backyard or front yard to getting a good night's rest. It was previously suggested by a select board member that Dino himself should reach out to the neighbors ahead of time prior to filing another entertainment license. So once again, we stand before you tonight. My clients have only discovered this request for modification in the legal notice section of the Mashpee Enterprise. Regarding amplification itself, the speakers have traditionally pointed toward the neighborhood. And with the way the outdoor deck is situated, it acts like a funnel into the neighborhood, directing the noise throughout the closest houses there. Amplified music has prevented my clients from enjoying their outdoor living space in the late afternoon and early evenings. And the Campbells once hosted a town manager and select board member. They had a sound meter available, and it registered in the 70 to 80 range, which I understand to be the equivalent of a loud vacuum, and a conversation couldn't be held outside. There have been times where the noise have been so loud in the past that use of a fan, air conditioning unit with the windows closed and earplugs have not mitigated the noise. Mrs. Campbell is a critical care nurse at Cape Cod Hospital, and she's often in bed early by 7 p.m. For early shifts at the hospital, including weekends. For my neighbors, or for my clients and their neighbors, this amounts to a quality of life issue, disturbing the peace, and it violates my clients' right to quietly enjoy their home. In addition, my clients have concerns about decreased property values in the neighborhood if amplified entertainment were to resume. Fencing does not work. Soundproofing and other mitigation efforts that have been proposed have not worked, or purported to be thousands of dollars worth have not worked. Countless phone calls and complaints to Dino's did not work. The only thing that did work was the select board modifying that entertainment license back in 2021 by eliminating amplified music. And also representations were made tonight that there were plans to turn the band and music in another direction. Those representations have been made in the past, and that doesn't really equal what happened in reality in the past. Also, I do want to state, Mr. Collins, specifically your question about the amplification and whether acoustic music was an issue. I've spoke to my clients about that, and they said that acoustic has not been an issue within the past few years, except for the time when I believe in the past that the acoustic guitars have actually plugged into the PA system. So it's really the amplification that's the issue itself. When entertainers are just strictly acoustic, there is no problem in the neighborhood. So simply put, this is not an appropriate location for outdoor amplified music. We strongly urge the board to deny the request for modification of the entertainment license to include amplified music. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak at this time? Please come to the microphone, state your name, who you represent, or your residence.
Good evening. I'm Duncan Campbell. I live at 4 Mohican Avenue that TJ was talking about. I sent an email to you folks about this to hopefully give you an idea of how dreadfully it would be to once more have de-amplified entertainment out on his patio.
Could you speak directly into the mic? Having trouble hearing.
Is it on?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe tilt it up a little.
Okay.
Thank you.
Some of my points from these letters are going back about 7 or 8 years. He and his attorney said he'd mitigate the sound by making changes to the physical layout of the deck. But only a back wall with a roof was installed, with no roof was installed. The sound still came out of the roof over to us. Also, he could have rearranged the patio so the bands face the street in the other direction, but he hasn't that we know of. The sound is, even though he was talking about that tonight, the sound is overwhelming to our neighborhood due to the high decibel levels, as TJ said, in the 70, 80 range, on our deck, witnessed by town officials. And some neighbors will say it physically shakes their windows. The loud sounds are also very stressful to all of us. That includes neighbors with high blood pressure, residents with health issues. The stress can make worse. Senior citizens and infants being affected well into the sleep hours. And we have another infant on the way on next month. The times of the night these occur interfere with all of our sleep times, especially those who need to rise early for work the next day, including weekends. And as TJ mentioned, my wife is a critical care nurse at Cape Cod Hospital and needs to be asleep at about 7 p.m., including some weekends. Why does he need to have some of these same bands outside when they are inside the other 8 or 9 months of the year? He can have them inside and also have an acoustic group out in the patio at the same time, if it's about income for him and his staff, as long as they have no amplified or loud voices or instruments, including percussion. Looking at other Cape towns on the Upper Cape and what their sound ordinances are, they all generally say that their loud noise plainly audible at a distance of 150 feet from its source is finable by the town. None have a time frame that it's okay for the loudness. These include Barnstable, Falmouth, Sandwich, and Bourne, and that's what I have copies of right here. They're all very similar. None of them say that it's restricted from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. or anything like that. It's a 24/7, 365 thing. None of, the lanes and the lanes and the commons had outdoor music, and they shut theirs outside music down when it affected the wind chime condos almost a half a mile away. So that was really carrying the sound. He has tried to get this permission reinstated a couple times since, but the select board has turned him down every time. So we ask again now, when he has done nothing new that we know of to mitigate the loudness. Well, one thing that has changed could be the membership of your board with two new members that may not have been around when this was an item a couple of years ago. But why can't he just be courteous to his neighbors and allow us to have a quiet summer, not waste time in these meetings? In any case, whether you are new or a longer member of the board, we hope that you will just do the right thing and once again deny him this permission. And maybe at some time make it a permanent restriction at this venue, no matter who owns it, similar to what the other towns have done. Thank you for your time in this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Is there anyone else from the public? Yes, sir, if you come forward. Please come to the podium, state your name, who you represent, or your residence for the record.
Sure, hello. My name's Damon Crook. I live at 3 Mohican Avenue. I think most things have been said pretty clearly tonight. There's just a couple of points I wanted to make, really, and that when the music was louder several years ago, I had a newborn son, and we weren't able to actually use the baby monitor for 3 to 4 days of the week, that the music, and that's with the windows shut and everything else. So it's kind of more of a safety issue for me, and I know that my next door neighbor's about to have a newborn in 1 month's time. So for me, that was kind of a safety issue. Secondly, I'm not a sort of a anti-fun police kind of person. I know my neighbors really aren't, and we do support local businesses, and I know I do. But I was disappointed 2 years ago that the permit request went in from Mr. Dino, and he didn't sort of come to me or anybody else in the neighborhood to discuss it first. I would have been open to negotiating something, whether it be certain weekends of the summer when it was really busy on the Cape, and people could have fun, and some of the neighbors could just suck it up, just like the Barnstable Fair. Everybody has to listen to the Barnstable Fair. The music's loud for the whole weekend. People are coming from all over the place. Families enjoying themselves. But it's tolerated, and the same kind of thing could have been done here. But the Dino organization decided to come in and just try and push that permit through kind of quietly, and I really didn't hear about it until the last minute and came and said my piece. And I would have still been open to negotiating and saying, okay, well, maybe we could work out some dates here, maybe certain times, maybe 1 week, 1 weekend, 2 weekends of the month, something that could appease both parties. But we've now seemed to have reached a divide where it's black or white, yes or no kind of thing. But I would have been open to talking about it and negotiating something and seeing what new setups are that we've heard tonight. But it just hasn't really happened in the past. And I don't see that really happening again. And in terms of the safety aspects before, when there's been larger bands or larger groups outside, that obviously brings in more people, but they're then filtering onto that car park around the back of the building, and then that sort of goes into fire code violations, safety regulations, which have been brought up. So there have been certain violations in the past, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong. So it's like, do you give an inch, or are they going to take a yard kind of thing, is what I feel. But I would still be open to negotiating and discussing this rather than just saying yes or no. I want to support local businesses, especially ones that do good things for the community like Dino does. So that was really I don't think there's anything else. But for me, it was a safety issue with the noise, just 4 days a week. With a newborn, it was not great.
Thank you for your comments and perspectives. Anyone else from the public that has questions or concerns? If you could please state your name and address, or who you represent for the record.
My name is Roberta Giangrasso. I live at 10 Mohican Avenue, next door to the Campbells. I'm very confused that we're here yet again. I thought we pretty much had this nailed and completed several years ago. I was the person who provided photographs to the board that not only were we dealing with the additional noise factor, but Dino had been warned on more than one occasion that he was exceeding by large numbers the amount of people who were at his venue. So I asked for clarity. Was Dino's in the back of the building, the front of the building, the parking lot, or the alleyway? Because there were tables and chairs and serving happening in all of those areas. So you're adding probably double the amount of people, indoors and outdoors. The music gets extremely loud. I'm the person who lives just a little, we have a hill, so I have one floor above the Campbells. The music goes over their house, right straight to my dining room. You're welcome to get the cute music there. The glasses in my china cabinet start tingling together, and you can actually feel vibration on my side deck. So again, the only things I have seen that have changed has been a few changes to our board and maybe some excess parking for Dino over at the Sherman-Williams buildings in the evening, because that was also a problem. There was parking everywhere, including for some of the fire hydrants. So I would please ask the board to continue to deny this. It is not the type of neighborhood for a nightclub. And that's the type of people we have coming there. They're not people who are coming there to just listen to music for a little while, have something to eat or leave. They're there all night. I wish the Mashpee Police would park across the street. I've seen people who walk out of there legless, drop their keys, can't find them. And I'm not going to accuse anyone of over-serving. I don't know where this person was coming from, but they were parked on our street. So this has been an issue for a while. I'm going to add one part of it, which is personal. I'm a terminal cancer patient. I would like to enjoy being with my family and my friends out on my own deck, in my own property, where I've lived for 18 years, well before Dino's had expanded into this outside venue that he decided to build. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. I think there was another gentleman in the back. Yes, sir. If you come to the podium and state your name and address or who you represent.
Thank you. My name's Steve Jarvis. I live on Pequot Ave, which is directly behind Dino's. And I'm sure everyone's heard all the issues regarding the amplified music. I just want to say that I'm not sure how we got here again. I've heard this same story 4 or 5 years ago. In my opinion, probably nothing has changed. I think about the process in which music is generated, and I think about who is going to manage the process once the music gets going and once it gets loud all over again. There's no one minding the store, especially when he goes home. What are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to close our windows and cover our heads? It's impossible. We live in a neighborhood where people are supposed to be able to enjoy peace and quiet, not some of the time, all of the time, every single day of the week. We're tax-paying citizens. We deserve that. I'm not sure why acoustics is so bad, but I can tell you that amplified music doesn't work. Me personally, I'm not interested in listening to the Baja Brothers. I just won't. And so the thing that bothers me the most is that if this were just, a request every now and then, the neighborhood would probably say, yeah, okay, no problem. If it's for a fundraising issue or things like that, but not every day up until 10 o'clock at night. And after 10 o'clock at night, who manages that process when people come out of the bar and they're legless, as she said? Who manages that? The police aren't there. I live on a dead-end street, and I can tell you that when the bar empties out and people can't find their way home, they're down in my street turning around 3, 4, 5, 10 times a night. I'm not paying for that. I'm paying for a quiet and peaceful residence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Was there anyone else from the general public that had comment at this time? Did you want to respond to anything you heard?
I'd like to respond to everything. I don't deny what these people are saying. We've had this hearing. We're talking about things that happened 6 or 7 years ago. The bands that Duncan was talking about is the bands that are not going to be playing out there, because that was the reason why there was so much music. And as this gentleman said about the Baja Brothers, those bands don't play out there anymore because we realized they were too big to be out there. And what I was trying to propose was the 1 to 2 people, which are basically acoustic with just a speaker, so we can actually hear them on the deck. We're not looking to put the Baja Brothers. I never said I was going to put the Baja Brothers in this whole presentation. I didn't get the opportunity to try it out after the last hearing. Like I said, I'm very open to speaking to my neighbors and to take the gentleman's offer. I'd be glad to sit down and talk to them in the next 2 weeks, and see if we can, come to something. The noise issue was well documented, okay? We tried our best, and unfortunately, with our improvements, it made it worse in that one tunnel. And I don't disagree, and I'm not denying it. But after all that happened with the overcapacity the lady was talking about, which did not violate fire code and everything else, I acknowledged my mistakes. I came before the board, got caught up in the heat of the time. That was 6 or 7 years ago. Everything, like I said, changed. I tried to implement. I did take off most of the speakers. We don't really bother anybody. We were only, even that time, there was no music outside at 10 o'clock at night. All the entertainment stopped at 8 o'clock, and then service stopped at 10, and people left. As far as the legless people, I've only been, in the 27 years that I've run this bar, I've only been, how the courts keep track of how many people get stopped out of your drinking establishment. They have a report that, they send us all the time, how many times. I've maybe had, in the 27 years, times 360 days a year, I may have had 12 out of, at that point, that the last drink was happening in my place, and they got arrested for everything else. I think, we do a great job monitoring. I have doormen on the thing all the time when there's entertainment. Responsible doormen. I'm talking about 18-year-old kids on the door. That have been with me for many, many years, for 20 years, the doormen. Local, again, all the entertainment is local. We're not bringing in AC/DC or KISS to play out here. We're bringing in the local people that can just sing and just provide ambient music basically for the next for 5 to 8 most of the nights. So I don't disagree with what they said, but that again, we already rehashed that 6 years ago. This is a new era. There's a new going on with the ability to control sound and just change the music, which I tried proposing last time. You can't compare a 1 or 2 piece with one speaker with the Baja Brothers that have 10. We're comparing 2 different things. We're not, comparing, one is. We know that doesn't work. We know where we made the mistakes. We know where everybody stands on this situation. We're just trying to move forward, and as I said last time, and I'll reiterate, and I'll close you with this, I came to the board so I can mediate with my neighbors. Because, I don't have nothing personally against them. I'm sure they don't have nothing personally against me. But if we can, with the board's guidance or, help, we can maybe mitigate this in the next 2 weeks. We can sit down, or I can show them. I mean, I had the plans and everything else, but it's easier to show sometimes in person. And maybe we come back in 2 weeks after we have a conversation. Just to flat out, just, not give me the opportunity, to fix something that I wasn't really given the opportunity to fix it after that whole fiasco 6 years ago. Then I think I'm denied my rights, everything else.
Thank you. Members of the board.
David?
Yes, Carol.
Dino,
Yes.
I have known you for many years, and I'm disappointed that you didn't reach out to these neighbors before tonight's meeting. They had to see it in the paper. I've been getting texts and messages. If you had only reached out to them, I mean, it's the same neighbors that were here 6 years ago. They're not new ones. And you haven't. And this is what you said at the last meeting, that you wanted a chance to reach out to your neighbors, and apparently you didn't.
The board told me, that, you know,
No, we said you couldn't do the music, but
Yeah.
that didn't say you couldn't
well,
reach
maybe,
out to
maybe I
your
should,
neighbors.
but that was before COVID and everything else. Now we come to trying to figure this out, you know, whether, because everything has changed since then. And I said, at some point, we need a mediator. You know, we need someone from the town to talk this through, because what I believe and what they believe are two vastly different things. And I understand it because been doing entertainment on Cape Cod for 30 years. So I am trying to explain to them, and if you're not versed as well in the sounds and a new technology, it's hard to show it on a piece of paper. Or, you know, I'd rather just sit down and talk to them too, but at some point,
You should have done that before this meeting.
well,
I'm disappointed.
there's a lot of things we should have all should have done.
We're not going to banter back and forth. We're going to move on to, I believe John had a question.
Yeah, you know, on top of what, you know, I don't want to repeat what Carol said, but, Dino, it's the same thing. It's all or nothing. We've been down this road, and, you know, same thing, you know, we hear the emails. You know, if you mentioned yourself, some of the people that had a problem, they mentioned, hey, if you went to them and said, hey, would you be okay with at least giving me an application for a special permit for a couple weekends, or special event, or something? Then you could say, okay, now you gave a little trial run. But that's not what you're here today for. You're asking for all or nothing. And the problem is, I think if you started with a baby step to give it a trial, I don't know, but I'm guessing the neighbors might have accepted to say, hey, July 4th weekend, what do you think up until 8 o'clock? And they could plan around it, and they could, but again, I don't want to speak for them. But if you did, I thought that would have been a good option. So I'm frustrated.
Tom?
Do you know, I heard the same thing as John said, he was just talking. He said, I think I've heard at least twice tonight from the people that live behind you, your shop, and they were willing to give you a couple of nights where you could play the music and give it a try. I think that was a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And I'm hoping that you could reach out to the families, the abutters up there, show them what you're proposing. If they give you, 2, 3, 4 nights a month, I'm not quite certain. See what you can do. Put it together. Give yourself a shot. Let them hear what you're going to provide them, what you're looking to do.
Absolutely.
I just thought there was an olive branch that was extended to you, and I think this is the time for you to
And I do
to see
take it,
if
and I
can
said I
happen.
would take it, you know, not to shut it down, let's get an opportunity to have a conversation. I'm the most easygoing guy around to
No,
figure out whatever. I made my
Dino, I've
mistakes.
known you for a
I
long
owned up to my
time now.
mistakes when we did
Yes.
6 years ago. I owned up to every single one in front of this board, humbled myself, and I said it was my mistake, it was my fault.
Yep.
You know, but that don't, you know,
Yep.
you know,
Okay.
I mean, come on, at some point we got to,
Michaela, did you have any questions?
I think Tom started the questioning and a comment asking about reaching out to neighbors. It's a thread I've heard from all my fellow board members. I can't add to that. I agree.
Yeah, and, I'm not going to beat a dead horse and repeat all the things that have been said numerous times. It sounds like there's consistency in some of the statements and things. So I think we've heard enough. I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing at this time.
Second?
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela? To close the public hearing.
Yes.
I'm a yes as well, so we now close the public hearing. So we have before us discussion of the board on how to move forward with the entertainment license.
One motion?
If you're ready to go to motion.
Okay. I make a motion to deny modification to the entertainment license for amplified outdoor music.
Second.
Hearing a first and second, is there any discussion on this?
I'm wondering if, is there a way we can add this, we'll
you'll
close
have
this
to
one
come
and
back.
possibly come back? Okay.
Well, we already closed the public hearing.
Right.
This is actually for the entertainment license. I think, to Tom's point, I guess, yeah, I mean, offer an opportunity to mitigate it and talk to the actual people, I'd like to see some sort of compromise to where, both sides kind of get what they want. It would be preferable, but it doesn't sound like it's going to happen at this time, so I don't want to discourage you from coming forward again. I would advise that, reaching out to them first, prior to coming forward, would actually carry a lot of weight, I think, with the board in their consideration. But any other discussion?
Could I just ask something?
Yes, ma'am.
In terms of process, because we very much want to do this. And we could also talk offline if that's more appropriate, in terms of if we then come to some kind of compromised position, what that would look like in terms of a license, if you will.
That's not for us to negotiate. I don't think, that's something to be worked out on your side.
Okay.
And then, coming forward with suggested conditions, I think would be helpful to town manager's office to frame it,
Yep.
to bring it to the board.
Yep.
But, it's not the board's job
Yep.
to enter into mitigation on
Yep.
behalf of the license. Is my understanding. Town manager?
I was just going to say, I don't want to put the board in a situation where the open meeting law is violated, so you'd have to put any proposal forward to this office, and I will get the name of counsel to the other party and discuss it with them. If I could just make sure I have both of your cards before you leave.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other discussion on this matter before we take a vote?
No, I'm good.
None?
You have a motion in a second?
We have a motion and a second. We were in discussion. I'm now going to vote. So, Michaela?
No.
Tom?
What are we voting on now?
To deny.
To deny.
To deny,
It's
yes.
yes.
Yes to deny.
Yes to deny.
Thank you.
John?
Yes.
It's a hash word.
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well, so the motion's denied. And, hopefully we can work this out and come back and consider it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Moving on, we have discussion and approval of request to authorize the use of unrestricted town-owned property along Johnson Road for nitrogen aggregation is allowed by Title V regulations to be credited. The 474 Main Street, 31 is Schumet Road. Town manager.
I just want to let the board know that I'm obviously not a lawyer, but there could be a legal issue regarding this matter, and this was requested to be put on the agenda at the 11th hour by the planner, and after consultation with the planner today, he understands the concern. The issue becomes the legality of the possible transaction. And there has to be a lot looked into before this comes before the board. I just didn't want the board to be deliberating on something that would not be legal. So we spoke to the individual today and said, we got to put the brakes on this. Not that we're against the concept. It's not that we are opposed to the plan. It's just we want to do it legally.
So-
And with consultation with the Inspector General's office, there is a legitimate concern.
So at this time, would it be the recommendation of the town manager to table or to
Table.
remove from the agenda?
The only thing I would respectfully request, Mr. Chair, is that you table it for tonight and let us just do our due diligence and get back to the board.
Buy some time.
That's fair.
Definitely
So,
postpone.
Just postpone. We just,
Indefinitely until,
and we've just got to do a little bit of homework before you even get this presentation.
So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to table the matter of the discussion and possible approval of the request to authorize the use of the unrestricted town-owned property along Johnson Road for nitrogen aggregation.
so moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second. Any discussion on this matter? Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Motion is tabled. Moving on, we have the Department of Natural Resources presentation, an update on the Mashpee Wakeby Diagnostic Study. Ed Eichner, TMDL Solutions, School of Marine Science and Technology, also known as SMAS, at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For those of you who don't know, it's been about a year since the School of Marine Science UMass Dartmouth has commenced work on the Mashpee Wakeby Diagnostic Study. Since that time, we've lost Chancellor Professor Brian House, and rest in peace. He was a great guy. But I have Ed Eichner here, and from TMDL Solutions and the SMAS, School of Marine Science UMass Dartmouth. And I also have here is Miles Sotomayor, who will be co-presenting with him.
Director, we got to make sure they get the new seal.
Yes.
Yes.
We are very proud of that seal.
Good evening. As Ashley said, I am the principal at TMDL Solutions. My name is Ed Eichner. I'm also an adjunct professor at the Coastal Systems Program, School for Marine Science and Technology at University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. And I worked closely with Brian for, 25 years or something like that. I'm here today to talk and give you a status update on our current project working on Mashpee Wakeby Pond, putting together a diagnostic study and management plan. These are the lists of tasks that we're currently working on. We started working on this last April. And we had a kickoff meeting with town staff and the Mashpee Wakeby Commission and the Mashpee Wakeby, I think it's Alliance, to sort of talk about the project and what we were planning on doing. We're going to go through and gather together previous data that's been collected for Mashpee Wakeby Pond that probably mostly will be PALS data, which is the Pond and Lake Stewart's annual snapshot data, which was supported by SMAS for over 20 years. That gives us good trend analysis data. We'll pull that data into the diagnostic assessment, and that involves a lot of data collection. We're going to be doing that over 2 years. As Ashley mentioned, we started last year. We'll be going again this year. We go out and we do a lot of water column sampling, looking at the DO, dissolved oxygen, temperature profiles. That's measurements throughout the whole water column, measurements of clarity, collection of water quality samples. We also install continuous monitoring devices that look at dissolved oxygen and temperature, chlorophyll and depth. And that's every 15 minutes. So we've got a much better sense of how factors change as we go through the months, rather than just looking at the monthly profile information. We go out and we gather phytoplankton surveys. We're looking at the whole population of phytoplankton, including the cyanobacteria, which you probably have heard a lot about. Populations of phytoplankton change as you go through the summer, and so it's important to understand if there's acceptable phytoplankton populations at some point during the year, so that we can get a sense of whether there are acceptable conditions to sort of target when we start to talk about management plans. We also go out and collect sediment surveys in each of the basins. This is collecting sediment cores, taking them back to the university, and then measuring as they move from fully oxygenated aerobic conditions all the way to anaerobic conditions, so we can measure how much phosphorus and nitrogen comes out of those sediments under different kinds of conditions. We're measuring stream outflow, and we try to get a whole year's worth of monitoring so that we know how water moves out of the system, how nutrients move out of the system. We look at rooted plants and mussels. We want to look at mussels in particular because most of the mussels, or there's a lot of mussels in Massachusetts that are endangered species. So when you move to management discussions, you want to know where the mussels are so you can avoid them. We'll go through and look at the watershed. We're going to look at where the houses are, where their septic systems are, how old they are, how far back from the water they are, to try to get a sense of, are they actually contributing to what we measure in the water column? And so we'll put together water, nitrogen, phosphorus budgets, and those will be sort of, in large part, the basis for developing the management plan that we're going to put together. We're also collecting stormwater at a couple of locations during a couple of storms to be able to give you a sense of how much those sources actually contribute. Typically, when we do that, it's a small source, but we want to make sure that we have that information to feed into the discussion about management. And so then, after we've gathered all that information together and we synthesized it, we'll move towards developing a management plan. So that management plan is going to say, is the pond impaired? Are the ponds, actually, the basins impaired? Why are they impaired? What are your options to get them back to acceptable water quality conditions? And how much might those options cost? How would they be implemented? How acceptable are they for the community? So that's sort of the management plan, and that will be done after we get through all of the data collection. So just as a sort of a heads up, these are the dissolved oxygen profiles for all of the data that was collected last year. The upper graph is the Mashpee Basin, the bottom graph is the Wakeby Basin. Each of the lines represents the depths where measurements were taken. They were taken a meter at every meter through the water column. And the red line is the key. That's a regulatory limit. Under state regulations, cold water systems like this pond has to have dissolved oxygen above 6 milligrams per liter. You can see a lot of the lines actually dip down below that, and at some point, typically in July, in both of the basins, you have no oxygen in those bottom waters. So the sort of the take home in here, and I don't know if it's news or not, these ponds are impaired. And so as we start to move forward and gather and synthesize all of the data, we're going to be trying to figure out what are your management options to get you back to an unimpaired or basically an acceptable water quality condition. Yes?
Do you have these same results year over year?
Pardon?
Do you have 2021 results?
No, so this is 2022. We'll have 2023 this year. So that's our 2 years.
Do we have 2021 that?
There's PALS data. PALS snapshot data is collected late in the summertime, and there's 20 years worth of that data. So that will be part of the discussion and understanding of what's going on there. I think when I've looked at that in the past, it has had anoxia, sort of those August readings. It has had anoxia in the past. pretty much, I think, consistently through the 20 years that we looked at the data.
I'm just curious about are we staying the same year over year? Are we declining?
Well, that's part of what we're going to go through. We're going to look
Okay.
through, and part of what we're going to do is look at all of that PALS data, that 20 years worth of data, and we're going to look at the trends. Probably the most informative are going to be things like light transparency, Secchi readings, to see if you have lost more and more of the water column as you've gone along. And then we'll look at, because the snapshot only takes place in August, we don't have a good sense of how those conditions develop. And that's sort of an important part of going through and doing the data collection that we're doing now, is to be able to say, how do those conditions that we see in August, how do they develop? Do they start in August? They actually start in June. So we're getting a sense of that. We'll see if there's a difference between this year and 2022 as we go along.
So for me, I'd like to see data from, say, 2019. I'm not so much concerned with 2021 or 2020. But 2019 is a threshold that I'd like to see because it's pre-COVID. And I think we had more seasonal rentals, pre-COVID. I think COVID changed that to where you have more year-round people isolated, from 2020 forward. We have people that can work remotely. Town assessments have gone up as a result of everyone coming in, buying everything up. And so that's kind of the critical element that I want to look at is kind of 2019 forward. I have enough in front of me to know, the ponds are impaired. This is a baseline that, this is concerning. And I wouldn't go as far as June. I'm seeing 522 is where they kind of cross the red, the red line. It's at 522 on both Mashpee and Wakeby, essentially, and it's carrying through till, September. That's concerning, when you're starting in May, where historically, I think, you started to have kind of, the effects of seasonal TMDLs effect upon in late August and things, this is really concerning for me.
Yeah, I mean, part of what we're going to go through and do is we've got a lot of water column data, and we're going to go through and we're going to see how those conditions develop, where the sources are. I mean, if the sediments are the primary source of the impairment, then that's sort of going to lead you to particular management things. If it's the watershed that's the primary source of what you see in the water column, then that leads you off in a different direction. And it may be a combination of both, but part of all of this data collection is teasing out what is most important in terms of managing the water quality here. And we will look at 2019. We're going to be looking at everything from 2021 through the present, through 2023.
The other contaminant that I don't know if it's in there, but the forever chemicals. It's my knowledge that the watershed flows in that southeasterly direction. So, to the northwest of us is the base. And, where are the PFAS coming this direction and getting into our ponds? That's something I'd like to know, and I'm very concerned with. The other thing is, when looking at this data and stuff, does it take into consideration the natural watershed opposed to now we have a manipulated displacement of water to where, you have town water redirecting natural watershed, and it happens as a natural occurrence, because everyone's watering lawns and, water being piped into all the different houses and everything. And so how does that affect the hydrology and what's making its way through runoff? If you're redirecting all this water, it's not just a natural watershed occurrence. there's a anthropogenic element to it.
Part of what we're going to be doing is we're going to look at, there's been a number of watershed delineations that have been done for this pond. As a result, watershed delineations on Cape Cod are based on groundwater and the way the groundwater is oriented. And part of what we have is we've got this huge integrated mosaic that was put together under the MEP, under the Massachusetts Estuaries Project, that looks at the watershed, that has the components of the pumping wells and how those orient things and all that sort of stuff. We're also going to look at whether there is additional data that orients different versions of that, because I know there are different versions that are out there that looked at different groundwater configurations at different times. So we're going to look at, we're going to try to bring as much historic perspective to all of this to try to understand what we're seeing, why we're seeing it, what the variability is. Things like in low water years, the water level of the pond's going to go down, the flow going out of the stream is going to go down too. And we want to try to bring all of that information into this discussion of management.
And how do you factor in normal rain seasons opposed to, like with your data collection, are you taking into consideration whether it's a normal rainfall year or
Yes.
is it a drought season, or are you coming off the heels of a drought? Is
Yeah.
that factored in as a variable?
Yes, so we're typically when we do management plans, and we've done a bunch of management plans, we look at when we are gathering data, what kinds of groundwater conditions are how close to average are we? Are we really off from average? The other thing that we have found is we've looked at some of the other ponds is what happens in the summer, you get a drop of the water table, and that can impact what goes on in terms of the volume of the pond, and that raises the concentrations that you see. So you've got to bring that all into the context of why you're seeing what you are seeing when you go out there and collect a water quality sample.
I guess because I get hyper-focused on the fact that, the rainfall is a form of transmission with the recharge, and so it can heavily skew, what's influencing the contamination or impediments.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, some of the ponds we've looked at, we just looked at one in Barnstable a couple of years ago. During the drought, when we were looking at that, we looked at the residence time as the groundwater table dropped, and that drop in the groundwater table explained everything in terms of what we saw in terms of concentrations. So that kind of information, bringing it to bear in terms of the way we look at everything, that's important in terms of coming up with all the management strategies.
I appreciate your, this presentation. Members of the board, do you have any questions?
Not at the moment. I do, just a quick one. Basically about the Mashpee River. And I find it very concerning because we've been up to our knees in the muck. And it just doesn't go away. It can't be good for the river. It doesn't get a good flush. I don't know, what's the alternative? What do we do? Do we look for a dredge? Do we clean that Mashpee River out to the sound?
Well,
Something's got to be done because it's not going to go away on its own.
I think part of what you want to have good information, because good information leads to good policy in terms of good decisions. So hopefully in the midst of making those, considerations, that you gather the necessary information to be able to understand why you're getting the sediments where you are and everything else, so that when you do something, it actually achieves what you want it to achieve. That's a little bit outside of where we're looking at this point, but I think bringing that to bear, we can certainly look at what we can see from what we're gathering right now.
But with the muck buildup that's there now, it can't do it on its own. The river just can't do it by itself. It needs to have help, mechanical help, and it's not chemicals. I don't know how else you can do it. And, I look at different lots where they actually divert the sewer, not the sewer, the drainage, the rainwater drainage, and it goes into the wood, into a wetland, and it goes into out into the river. And it's just, none of this is good. It was not a good idea to divert the water from the catch basins out into an abandoned cranberry bog that's not doing anything but pushing it out to the river.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well-
you know it better than I know it. I'm just looking for I'm going to say a quick fix, because it's been like this and getting worse for 30 years. I've been here for 30 years now.
Yeah.
And there used to be frogs and turtles and all sorts of wildlife there. Not anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think who it was. Oh, it was Ed Baker that used to always, I don't know if you remember Ed Baker, but
Yes.
Ed always used to open with, I used to be able to see my toes, and now I can't see
Right.
my toes. So I got it. And so it is something that, though, I think you need to have an understanding of why those sediments are gathering there. I mean, they're a product of what's coming down the river, but they're also a depositional area too. And part of the whole, looking at the estuaries project and trying to reduce the nitrogen and everything else, that area is a transitional area, so it's nitrogen and phosphorus, probably. So you're probably looking at trying to control both of those so that you have less fines that are being deposited there. Whether that leads you ultimately to having to do something mechanical, I don't know. That's a discussion you guys are going to have
And then
and
we have
figure
a
out.
title problem, because it's on a title. It's
Right.
not always going out. It's coming back in, and all of a sudden it's stagnant and it locks onto the bottom, and that's where it stays.
Yeah.
I believe Board Member
Thank you.
Michaela had a question.
This year's data, and as everybody else, I agree it's concerning. I have a question about timeline. So this is the data from year one. You're going to collect data through this year and come back to us with both years of data. So I understand that, and then you're going to start to put together proposed management plans that will be defined. How will you allow for or account for the variations that David was asking about? So I know you said if you get an extraordinary wet season, that will make a difference. If you have a very dry season, it might. I'm just curious what other data you filter in to account for those in the management plans that you might present.
Well, part of what we're going to do is we're going to have these 2 years of refined data, and we're going to look at the water table as it goes through that period. Is that an average condition? Is it a low condition? How do we anticipate that actually impacts what we actually measure? And by looking at how that changed over the year, we can get a sense of, well, if April, for example, was closer to high groundwater conditions and August was low groundwater conditions, we can sort of gather by looking at those two kinds of differences what we're looking at in terms of the measurements that we see in the water column, as well as what that has the potential to be. So we're trying to put all of that together to be able to give you the fullest picture that we can of what the variations impact, how they impact what you see in the water quality.
So combining, I'm just making sure I understand, combining the historical data and the other data you have with this more refined data will paint the picture.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I guess one question that I just, looking at this graph, the incremental testing, the way it's charted, it's not uniform in the increments.
So
you have one for May, two for, one for April, two for May, three for, or two for June, and then three for July, August, and then return back to two for
Right. So we concentrated most of the sampling in the June to September period, because that's where we're really trying to, that's your primary conditions where, you know, the ecosystem is under its most stress, people are using the pond the most.
Are those measurements for different depths? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so what,
Those are
each of those
depths,
lines is a
David.
depth. So you're going
That's why
from
there's
half a
three.
meter to
You want
one and then
line.
on down the
Bottom of the
line.
graph.
Bottom, okay.
So those, part of, you know, sending people out there to do that kind of measurements is, you know, a challenge to go out and do that kind of thing on a regular basis. That's what we're trying to get to, is that refined data. We are tag teaming that with the data that we're collecting continuously. We've got the devices out there measuring every 15 minutes. And those two layers of data collection, we're putting those together to have an understanding what's happening in between each of those times that we go out there and do these profiles. So by sort of blanketing with a number of different data collections, we're hoping to get a fuller picture of what actually is going on.
No, appreciate it. I guess the only other thing I have is, you know, as far as in the management plan, that, did you, and you may have mentioned it, you know, will there be recommendations? I know some of our laws are kind of old and antiquated. So, you know, will there be advice as to target areas where, you know, maybe increased water, wetland buffers and watershed buffers are required, in kind of how that may effectively benefit and mitigate some of the impediments?
In large part, we're going to allow the data to sort of guide us in terms of what the best management strategies are. I mean, most of the wetland buffer kinds of ideas, unless there is a direct discharge through a site, those tend to be best management practices. You want to have adequate buffers around your pond. You want to have winding paths heading down to the pond. Those sorts of things are sort of standard, and we will certainly reinforce those kinds of things. But where we're trying to get to is what you see in the water column, why you see the impairments, and what are the options to remove those impairments.
I ask that because, you know, when you look at, say, Google Earth, you know, satellite view, you can see where there's, like, you know, bacteria in green, you know, it shows up as green, and the healthy water's black. You know, so when looking at those, you can see where the concentrations of impediments are coming from. It's from your developed areas. And so, like in a conservation area, you know, 150 may be sufficient, you know, maintaining that. There's no development. It's held in, there's conservation restrictions. But in a developed area, based on the density, you know, maybe you need to push it back to 300 feet. You know, you may have to push it back more to effectively change. And is that factoring in, you know, the redistributed recharge? Those kind of things are going to influence, you know, your wetland buffers and how you mitigate the impediments, in my opinion. Am I wrong on that?
Well, part of what we're going to look at, and one of the things I mentioned was, we're going to look at where all the septic systems are and how old they are, because in large part, that determines whether they are actually contributing phosphorus to the pond right now, or it's sometime in the future. Because phosphorus travels very slowly. Once it gets into the groundwater, it gets bound up with the sand particles. And so typically you've got to have 20 or 30 years worth of travel time. The house and the septic system have to be there at least 20 or 30 years before it actually impacts the pond. And that's why we're starting to see water quality problems all throughout southeastern Mass, is because we had a big building boom in the 1980s. Now we're starting to see those impacts showing up at the ponds. And so when we go through and we look at Mashpee-Wakeby, we're going to go through and do that process and try to target, you know, because it's an impact of how fast the groundwater travels too, we're going to look at how fast the groundwater is traveling in particular areas to be able to get a sense of, okay, this is an area that is contributing because of the age of the septic systems and the groundwater travel times this area is not, these are the things that we're going to look at and try to bring into the management discussions about the best strategies that you're going to be able to implement.
So with that same logic, we wastewater particular areas around the pond. It's going to take 20 or 30 years to filter out all that sediment that has been captured in the sedimentation around the septics.
No.
Before it's
If you
washed
sewered
out
those
and it's clean?
properties, you're turning off the source of phosphorus. So,
to make them whole and clean, phosphorus-free, if they've taken 50 years of leaching of the phosphorus, how long before the remnants of that is gone?
so you got the phosphorus moving along with the groundwater. Groundwater moves about 1 foot per day. The phosphorus gets bound up. So you bind up the initial source, and then the phosphorus moves on to the next portion of the aquifer, and then it binds up that portion, and then it moves on and on and on and on and on, and eventually it gets to the pond. Now, if you shut off the source, you turn off the septic system leach field by connecting it to a sewer, there is no more source to sort of push those along. You have a lot bound up, but it's not going anywhere anymore. So if you have a sewer, you are turning off that, and it's probably going to take a couple 3 years for it to turn off, but that's going to be it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
To your indulgence, I just also wanted to acknowledge, we talked a little bit about Brian Howes here. All of this, the Coastal Systems Program, the pond monitoring wouldn't have happened without Brian Howes. Brian, I know, is a big friend of Mashpee's. He came here often, has a place in New Seabury. He was a key in terms of getting pond management going on the Cape. When I worked at the Cape Cod Commission, we were setting up the Cape Cod PALS program, Pond and Lake Stewards program. Brian came to us and said, how would you like if I provided laboratory services for free? And that was the stepping point for a lot of communities to step off and start to look at their ponds. We had pond volunteers, we had pond advocates, we had a lot of people that came and were really energized to look at what was going on. And in large part, that was because of Brian's generosity. If you would, I'd also like Miles Sundermeyer to talk from the university, just to give you a sense of what's going on at the university with Brian's position.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm not a resident of Mashpee, but I live one town over in Sandwich. But I am a longtime colleague of Brian Howes. I am a professor at the University of Massachusetts in the School for Marine Science and Technology as well. I've worked with Brian for over 20 years. He was a mentor to me when I first started there as well. So I just wanted to come and introduce myself. I have been, as a close collaborator with all the senior staff in the Coastal Systems Program, I have been helping transition the program at SMAST to new leadership. Our Vice Chancellor for Research reached out to the towns and all the clients across the Cape and Islands after Brian's passing and basically reaffirmed the commitment of the university in the mission of the Coastal Systems Program. The university continues to stand behind the work that Coastal System Program does. They are continuing to invest in the program. We actually are in the process now. I talked to the Vice Chancellor today, and we are in the process of advertising a new position for a senior environmental researcher to basically take over the helm. We don't expect anyone can fill Brian's shoes. He was really a mover on the Cape and really just, as you know, a tireless advocate. So I basically just want to convey, rest assured, there are a number of senior staff in the Coastal Systems Program, the ones listed on the slide here, Ed and others. The towns are in capable hands. There's a lot of expertise, experience, and that work will go forward from the university's side. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do owe, Mashpee and its waters owe a tremendous debt to the work that Brian did, and, we really miss his presence and passion. And on behalf of Mashpee and our environment, thank the university for its commitment to helping us address these issues. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that the PALS program really initiated this Mashpee Wakeby diagnostic study. We initially saw the dissolved oxygen levels on lowering each year after year at further depths. And we noticed that, and that's what started the conversation for this Mashpee Wakeby diagnostic study. So thanks to Brian and that program, we're now moving forward. So I'm going to switch gears. Do your thing. It's next on your agenda, but the TRC group is going to be presenting their findings on Santuit Pond. And I just wanted to give some background into the project and how we got here. So the Town of Mashpee's Department of Natural Resources and the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe's Natural Resource Department have been working diligently to address the causes and remedies to address the incidence of harmful algal blooms on Santuit Pond. As you know, these blooms are a public health threat caused by excessive internal and external loads of phosphorus. Today's presentation by TRC Group will focus on the results of studies to address the internal phosphorus within Santuit Pond. As you know or may have not known, AECOM reported back in 2010 in their diagnostic study that 78% of all of the phosphorus is resident to the pond, or it is already contained within the pond. This phosphorus is affecting the cyanobacteria blooms we see today. Today, TRC will present summaries of studies and findings of work performed for the town and the tribe under a technical assistance grant through the SNEP network, or South East New England Partnership Program. In 2021, the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe and the town of Mashpee applied to the SNEP network for technical assistance to evaluate and implement measures to address phosphorus pollution within the Santuit Pond watershed. Phase 1 and 2 of this joint venture included tasks such as training to develop concept designs for stormwater retrofits and green infrastructure, engaging the Army Corps of Engineers to understand the results from their dredging feasibility study done on the pond, and assistance in creating a watershed-based plan for Santuit Pond, contracting with TRC Group to address measures of the internal nutrient inactivation and loading in the pond, baseline water quality monitoring surveys to measure current water quality conditions, along with sediment coring and phosphorus fractionation analysis of all the data collected, which you're going to hear about tonight. And of course, the support for future grant applications and public engagement and communications for stormwater, watershed management, and ecological restoration. Please see the newly released Santuit Pond Learning Hub. A QR code can be found in the handout provided tonight. The website can also be found on the DNR page. All information from tonight's presentation will be found on that website, along with frequently asked questions in regards to nutrient inactivation or aluminum sulfate treatments. Matt Ludwig, here with you tonight, is from TRC, the company that we contracted out to conduct and analyze the data collected from Santuit Pond. Matt is a water resources professional, certified lake manager and project director with TRC companies. TRC is a leading global environmental consulting, engineering, and construction firm delivering professional service to both public, private, and government clients. Matt is the project manager for the Santuit Pond project with expertise in design and implementation of lake and reservoir management. And with that, I give you Matt.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for having me tonight to present the results of our studies here.
Good evening.
So let me just start off with a presentation overview, just so everybody can kind of follow along a little easier. We've got a lot of information to present tonight. So really what we're going to be focusing on tonight is the connection between sediments and water quality. So Ashley kind of hinted at this, and actually the previous presenter also did as well. They're still doing their study, but at Santuit Pond, we know that internal loading of phosphorus from the sediments is an important factor in what's driving the problems at the pond. So tonight we'll kind of go over why it's a problem at Santuit Pond, talk about what exactly drives it, and then most importantly, how can it be addressed. These questions will be addressed in the context of a couple of recent studies of Santuit Pond, both of which were wrapped up last year. The first was done by ESS Group. It was a focused feasibility study that really focused on interim measures. You know, we know that fixing septic systems and fixing stormwater issues is going to provide good results in the long term, but sometimes those take a while to be implemented and to also see those impacts, the beneficial impacts to the water quality. So this focused feasibility study was really primarily trying to identify the interim measures that we could take to improve water quality now. And then as a follow-up, the baseline monitoring, sediment coring, and nutrient inactivation dosing study that Ashley mentioned, completed by TRC as well last year. So just an overview here of the focused feasibility study, that first study, again, completed by ESS Group, 2021 to 2022. It was mostly based on existing data. So we looked at AECOM's 2010 diagnostic study of the pond, which was very thorough, comprehensive. We also examined Mass DEP's latest integrated list of waters at the time, which is the 2018-2020 reporting cycle. The U.S. Army Corps had done some sediment sampling and testing. We reviewed those findings. They were pretty recent from 2021. And then we also looked at other sources of recent and historical water quality data. We did conduct one site visit in October, but it was not an intensive field visit at the time. It was really just sort of to take a look at the site and get familiar with it. So what came out of this? Well, we identified important environmental resource designations and jurisdictions that might impact what we could do here at the pond as far as management goes and how that would be permitted. And we also assessed the feasibility of different in-pond management tools that could be used to improve water quality. So that's sort of the key there, is the in-pond stuff, which is going to work faster to improve water quality. So a little bit about the reports that we reviewed, just to kind of refresh everybody's memories. If you already know this, and if you didn't, just to give you, catch you up to speed on what the AECOM diagnostic study found. So this study was done in 2010, actually took, I think, a year of data before that. Found that the pond was highly nutrient enriched, very high phosphorus, low transparency, which also referred to as Secchi depth, and high chlorophyll A, which is really just a measure of algae. Additionally, dissolved oxygen depletion at the pond bottom was allowing the release of iron-bound phosphorus, and we'll kind of come back to that later on. But just keep that in mind right now. Iron-bound phosphorus can be released under certain conditions, including low dissolved oxygen. So that was resulting in internal loading from the sediments into the water column. And the study found that 78% of the annual phosphorus load was coming from those internal sources, with the remainder coming from external sources, which we know is stormwater, septic, precipitation, things like that. The study also developed a recommended target phosphorus concentration of 15 parts per billion to help avoid those recurring algae blooms in the future. And it examined 3 in-pond restoration options that would be large scale enough to actually have an impact on the pond. First was dredging. That was not recommended due to expense and some logistical questions, as well as the possibility of some sediment contamination. Basically, they found that dredging would be tens of millions of dollars to do right, to get the whole pond dredged. Without looking into specific feasibility, they kind of were able to write that off pretty quickly at the time. Circulation, which is just moving the water around in the pond, literally, that was recommended and it was implemented. There were several solar bee circulators that were installed in the pond after this study was completed. And then nutrient inactivation, which is actually binding the phosphorus up so that it can't get into the water column, was also recommended. However, that was not implemented.
And how do you do that?
That's coming up.
Okay.
Another document that we looked
Right.
at was Mass DEP's
I thought
final
that's what it was.
integrated list of waters. Basically, this really hasn't changed much in the last few years. Santua Pond is impaired for a number of reasons, and they're almost all linked. So chlorophyll A, again, that's the algae, which if you have a lot of chlorophyll A, you may get harmful algal blooms. That's when the cyanobacteria develop. It's going to lead to nutrient eutrophication and biological indicators changing. So again, having the cyanobacteria being dominant in the pond, that's not a great thing. Many people don't know this, but if you have a lot of algae photosynthesizing in the water column during the day, it's pulling carbon dioxide out of the water, which means your pH goes up, it becomes more basic. And if you have a lot of algae doing that during the day, you can get really high pH levels. And then at night, all that crashes down when the algae stop photosynthesizing, and you go back down to a lower pH. So you get these big swings in pH, which is not good for the pond. Total phosphorus is really kind of driving this. So again, that's another impairment there. And all of this all relates to how well you can see in the pond, the transparency and the clarity of the water. And then the final sort of major study that was reviewed and reported on in that feasibility study was the Army Corps' sediment sampling and testing, key findings from 2021. On the right-hand side, you can actually see a core photo of a core that's been broken down and split in half. Basically, the core found that fine sediments are present over a whole lot of the pond. Sometimes they're as much as 8 feet or thick or thicker. And some of those contaminants that we're talking about earlier are found at values that may actually exceed the state soil and groundwater standards. So if you were to take those out, place them on land, you might have an issue. If they stay in the pond, there could be other issues, but that's better than taking them out, putting them somewhere where they're not supposed to be. Total phosphorus was one of the things that they measured. They didn't really look at phosphorus the same way that we did, which I'll talk about later. But we at least got an idea of what the total phosphorus was from some of these cores. Again, the average phosphorus in the first 2 feet of the sediment, so the top layers of sediment, was about 0.35 milligrams per gram, or 350 milligrams per kilogram. And average phosphorus for the uppermost portion of the whole core, which is about 8 feet, was much higher. It was an order of magnitude higher, 8.55 milligrams per gram. So there's lots of phosphorus in the sediments. They didn't, like I said, break it into fractions, so it was really kind of difficult to know on that study alone how much of that would fall into the iron-bound phosphorus that AECOM had mentioned in their report versus other kinds of phosphorus. So what do we produce out of this first feasibility study? Well, what can we do? We looked at several different management options. We looked at the aeration circulation option again and said, hey, it may not be doing the whole trick because we're still seeing cyanobacteria blooms and impaired water quality, but it doesn't look like it's doing anything bad necessarily, so let's keep going with that. And we have algae in the pond. We could use algicides. That's also a recommendation. And I'll get into more detail in these in the next slide. We looked at a bunch of other things, barley straw, bioaugmentation, which is adding sort of enzymes or bacteria to the pond, biochar, biomanipulation, stocking it with different fish. We looked at nutrient inactivation, which we're going to talk a lot about coming up here. Sonication, which is actually using ultrasound to sort of break the algae cells up. Most of those were not really viable at the scale that we needed, but we did pick 3 things that we thought could be, which is the aeration circulation, algicides, and the nutrient activation. So in sum, the circulation, we found the solar bee circulators, they're already in place, they're being used. Let's continue to use those for now. Algicides, we could use those to control blooms, but they're not going to address the underlying cause, which is the nutrients. So that's more of like the Band-Aid. It's not going to really kind of get you systemic control, but if you have a public health emergency and you want to have the pond be useful, algicides will do the trick quickly. You just got to do something else to prevent that from happening again. And that's kind of where the nutrient inactivation comes in. This is what we would be using to address the root cause, locking up the phosphorus that's in the sediments instead of letting it release into the water column. However, it's kind of a complicated affair, so it needed follow-up study. We want to be able to provide updated information of concentrations in the phosphorus and have them broken into fractions, not just the total, because that determines how phosphorus will be released into the water column. We also wanted to determine the actual depth of the sediment layer that was active. So just because you have phosphorus 8 feet down doesn't mean it's actually going to come up to the surface. What is that depth? And then finally, calculate a dosage that would be needed to bind the available phosphorus in this active layer. And that's where the next study comes in, the follow-up study, which is this baseline water quality sediment and dosing study. As I mentioned, this was completed last year. It was really a follow-up to the first study, a little bit more field-based. If you look on the right-hand side here, those yellow points are sediment core locations. So we collected 5 sediment cores. And then we had an in-pond water quality location, which is the blue point at the deep spot of the pond. This is really designed to address the outstanding data gaps that we mentioned previously. We need to know what's the actual internal loading of phosphorus like now compared to 2010, and then be able to use that information to develop an appropriate dosing for nutrient inactivation. Importantly, the sampling that we did under this study was conducted under an EPA-approved Quality Assurance Project Plan, or QAP. So we wanted to make sure we had high-quality data to share with you all tonight. And we wanted to do it right. So we got approval from Region 1 on our Quality Assurance Project Plan. Took a little more time, but was worth it. Now to the findings. So probably not a surprise here. We still have evidence of low dissolved oxygen in the pond. It wasn't extreme when we were out there in June of 2022, but there was, again, the hypoxic or low oxygen conditions developing at the bottom of the pond. We were out there in early June. We would expect this to get worse as the season goes on. Temperatures get warmer. The water can hold less dissolved oxygen, so you get below those critical thresholds for fish faster because the water just can't hold as much oxygen. So if it's at all depleted, you're in trouble. You also have respiration rates increasing. So as things get warmer, all the stuff that lives in the pond can respire a little bit faster, can metabolize faster, so you're going to get more respiration, which takes up oxygen, just like what we do when we're breathing. And also, the conditions that we measured were midday, which is when photosynthesis is active. So as I mentioned earlier, when you have photosynthetic algae, your pH is going to go up and your dissolved oxygen concentrations are going to go up because those algae are taking carbon dioxide, turning it into oxygen. At night, you get the opposite. So if we had gone out, measured at night, you'd see a drop. This profile that I show you here, the left-hand line, which is in blue, is really the profile to focus on. And this is it's presented a little differently than the last presentation. It's just one point here for simplicity. But basically, you're going from the top of the water column at 0.0 down to the bottom of the water column at 9 feet. So this is a single vertical profile of dissolved oxygen. You can see you're pretty good on dissolved oxygen. You've got 7, 8 milligrams per liter here going through most of the water column. But then when you get down to the bottom, you run out. And that's where the sediments are. So that's what's important. You need to have dissolved oxygen at the bottom of the pond. Otherwise, as we show in red here, you have potential release of phosphorus from the sediments.
Black dash line?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The black dash line, what's that represent?
Oh, the black dash line that's the Secchi depth. So that's basically how far into the pond that you can see. It just happened to be on the graph, but it's not as, I think the main takeaway here is really the dissolved oxygen and the fact that we are running out of it at the bottom and having this potential release of phosphorus from sediments.
Other question.
Yeah.
It looks like your sediment core points are essentially on, the upper portions, down in the lower portions, it doesn't seem to be any. What's the reason? I can't read or make out what the orange lettering is. And, do those colors correlate with what we're seeing on the graph? Or
Those colors don't, no. So the answer to your question is the Army Corps was, as part of their study, which I don't think is finalized yet, but they were looking at potentially dredging and moving some of that sediment around in that southern portion of the pond when we did the study. So we specifically didn't sample down there. I would expect the sediments to be fairly similar, but we didn't do it because we thought, well, if they're going to do that, then we wouldn't to nutrient inactivation down there because they're going to move the sediments around anyway. At this point, it looks like that's less likely. So essentially, but that's why we didn't sample there, but we still believe that the results are valid for the pond overall.
Because I'm wondering, also, what comes to mind is, you know, if you were to do a combination of these different options, you know, if you were to dredge in maybe some of the deeper portions or where there's the heavier sediments, and do heavier sediments correlate with there's more higher concentrations of development opposed to, you know, where they're surrounded by conservation areas, you know, what's the core samples explain? I mean, how does that correlate with development areas and kind of green spaces as adjacent?
I think on water quality, you might see a little bit more of that correlation. In regard to the sediments, basically once the water makes it into the pond and can kind of circulate around, the algae will grow throughout the pond. They'll settle out and take the phosphorus with them when they settle out. So it kind of spreads around the whole thing. What's more important when you actually get into looking at sediments is how gravity moves those sediments down over time. So I guess to your point, you would expect the higher concentrations to be where the finer sediments have settled, which is kind of tends to be the low spot in the pond.
So if you were to dredge anything, you'd want to dredge the deeper points, no?
Well, it depends on what your target is for the dredging. I think when we came into this study, dredging the whole pond for the purpose of getting rid of the nutrients had been kind of pushed off the table as just being too much. So they were evaluating more of a habitat restoration alternative in that southern portion of the pond. Ashley, did you?
So after the Army Corps of Engineers took their sediment core samples, just because the northern section of the pond is really at the head of the watershed, receiving most of the waters, it was more contaminated. The sediments were more contaminated in that area and more likely not to meet sediment reuse, which means, you know, extraction from the pond and put in an area where it can sit and do that and get a permit to do that through DEP. The southern section of the pond, the soil samples came up cleaner, which is to be expected because they're near the outflow of the Santuit River.
So if we do any kind of bog restoration, we could potentially use sediments from the southern portion to try to recreate like a cedar swamp, peat bog environment, potentially?
The dredging feasibility study has yet to be completed. We're still waiting on the formal packet from the Army Corps of Engineers. But what I've heard is it did require additional funding through the Town Tribe Collaborative. And I didn't know if that was going to move forward or not, just because based on the data we've seen so far. So the answer is, I don't know.
Thank you.
And my apologies if I misunderstood the question before. I'm sort of focused on the phosphorus, so I know there's other questions about the heavy metals and other things in the lake sediments, and those may be affected differently, sure. So on the water quality side, what else did we find? Well, total phosphorus remains elevated. So the green point at the top of the chart is the AECOM median value for total phosphorus from the 2010 study. That was 80 parts per billion. Our point is the orange square. We found 67 parts per billion. So it's, you know, it's not a lot of measurements, but it's close to, but lower than what AECOM was finding as a median. So that's good news. Unfortunately, the bad news is it needs to come down a lot more to really sort of eliminate these recurring algae blooms. So if you look at the green square and the yellow circle at the bottom, that's kind of where we need to be. And so this chart is really just kind of showing the difference here. We've got 50 parts per billion that we've still got to come down to really make those targets. So how do you do that? AECOM had predicted that if you added circulation to the lake and you did it right, you could possibly get down to 38 parts per billion. That's not low enough, but that would be a big drop. That would be more than half way down. Our Results sort of suggest that that probably hasn't happened. We probably haven't gotten even that 38 parts per billion, so we're not even really at that blue diamond yet, or close to it. So we've got a lot of work to do here, is kind of what this slide is showing. So on the sediment end of things, which is kind of where we really focused our efforts, we wanted to reassess the sediment phosphorus fractions that AECOM had looked at in the 2010 study. So we collected 5 sediment cores. 2 of them were at locations that were previously sampled, so SCP-1 and SCP-2. We wanted to kind of go back to those same places and say, what do the new sediments that have settled on top of the old ones tell us? Have things changed? We collected these cores to at least 20 centimeters below the sediment surface. So on the right-hand side here, you'll see the bottom photo of the core. That's a full core that came up with sediment in it. So we got pretty good penetration here, got pretty representative cores. That top photo is actually showing you how we process the cores. So what happens is we actually push those cores up to the top of the sampler, and as they come up, we slice off 2-centimeter sections, cross sections. Each of those sections goes into a cup and then gets sent off to the lab for analysis. So it actually gets you these 2-centimeter thick profiles of the vertical profile of the sediment column. Tells you how much phosphorus is into the surface, how much is down deeper, and where's that active layer, and how do the different kinds of fractions change over that vertical profile. This, you can kind of ignore that diagram on the right. That's really sort of the lab analysis. My point in putting it in here is just to kind of call out these 4 fractions that we looked at. So there's this FEP fraction, which is the mobile fraction. This includes the iron-bound fraction that AECOM was talking about. This is characterized really by rapid release into the water column when dissolved oxygen is low. And then if you go to the far right of that diagram, we have organic phosphorus, which is just what it sounds like. This is phosphorus that's still bound up in organic tissues. So plants and algae and animals that have died and go into the sediments, that phosphorus may still be locked up in an organic form. We also have calcium-bound phosphorus, just bound to calcium. That can be stable, but when things start getting a little acidic, when the pH is low, that can release the phosphorus as well. And then we also have aluminum-bound phosphorus, which is really the most stable type of phosphorus under typical environmental conditions. So just kind of looking at what we found versus what AECOM found, we really found that the primary phosphorus fractions were organic and iron-bound. So on the left, the circle there at the bottom is showing the average that we found, 0.44. This is expressed as milligrams per gram of dry sediment in the top 4 centimeters. And AECOM found 0.37, so those numbers are pretty close. Maybe it's nudged up a little bit, but some of that could be chalked up to the fact that we collected cores in slightly different locations, and there's some variability in those results, but that's pretty spot on. And even our total phosphorus numbers, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, very similar, 1.11 versus 1.20. So essentially, really nothing's changed. We're kind of seeing the same sort of issue as they saw. They didn't measure these other fractions, but that's okay. We can kind of assume that everything that wasn't iron-bound and is part of the total phosphorus is broken into those other fractions. So this really suggests the potential for internal loading of phosphorus remains really high, similar to what it was in pre-2010. So here I'm presenting some of the key sediment findings. Organic phosphorus really is higher than new sediments than the old. If you look on this graph on the right, the more recent sediments are at the top and the older sediments are at the bottom, they're buried. And this line is a result, it's the average of our results of all these sediment cores, and it shows this slope down to the left. That represents the release of organic phosphorus over time. So what's happening here is you have organic material in the sediments that's breaking down. As it breaks down, it releases the phosphorus. So there's less phosphorus in the old sediments than there is in the new phosphorus because there's been more time for them to release them. Part of the key of this is what happens to those released phosphorus, the released phosphorus from those sediments, those organic sediments. We have so much iron in the sediments that the iron picks it up, which sounds like a good thing. The iron binds it. The problem is that bond is really just temporary. So if you have these cycles where dissolved oxygen gets really low, you're going to release that phosphorus into the water column anyway. So it's really not helping us all that much. As oxygen depletes, again, we're getting phosphorus released into the water where it then becomes available to algae and cyanobacteria during the growing season. Moving on to what we can do about it, because that's kind of what we really want to focus on. There's a few things that you should look at first before thinking about nutrient inactivation to make sure that your project is a good fit for it and that it will do what you think it will do. First, phosphorus has to be the key in driving the problem. So here we have a pretty well-established issue with phosphorus that's been high for a really long time. We kind of know that. We have algae blooms that have been recurring for a long time. We know that. Second, a substantial portion of the phosphorus has to be due to internal loading. If it's coming from external loading, putting a bunch of nutrient inactivation binder in the pond is not going to help you a whole lot. Here we know that 78% of the internal loading is coming from the sediments. So it's a pretty good candidate for phosphorus inactivation. Next, the flushing rate of the water body is not excessive. So this is sort of the inverse of the residence time. Essentially, if the water is moving through really quickly, you don't really want to use nutrient activation because as soon as you put it in, the water's getting flushed. Algae doesn't really have time to grow. Here we have a significant enough residence time that we know the water stays and the algae stays when it forms. So it kind of makes more sense that you'd want to do something about it because that water's sitting around. Next, if you really want a rapid improvement in water quality, nutrient inactivation can do that. It's a chemical reaction that works very quickly. You should also, to really kind of make this kind of a no-brainer, have a cleared space for staging and chemical storage and access to the pond. We've done projects. We don't do the alum treatments ourselves, but we've permitted and studied ponds where access was not available. And the treatment vessels were actually craned into the pond, so it can be done if you don't have an access point, but it's a lot easier if you do. So at Santuit Pond, we do have access. And then cost effectiveness is really important. If you want to get the most bang for your buck, nutrient inactivation is a good way to go, generally speaking. So some more of the recommendations that came out of this study, really our target here is to convert the oxygen-sensitive iron-bound phosphorus into a more stable form. So how do you do that? Well, I think you may have remembered I mentioned the aluminum-bound fraction of the phosphorus in the sediments previously. That's a very stable bond. We can actually add aluminum to the pond to settle out into the sediments and replace the iron, essentially, that's currently bound to the phosphorus, and the aluminum will lock it up for a longer period of time. One of the most commonly used chemicals to do this is called alum, aluminum sulfate. It's been used in a lot of Cape ponds. There's at least a dozen I can think of right now in the last decade or so. It's the same chemical that's used in drinking water treatment processes. Actually, all these photos are from drinking water reservoirs, so these are alum applications that happened in those water bodies. It's injected underwater. It's not dumped off the side of a boat or anything like that, or sprayed. And that's where it forms the flocculant, so it actually forms something that you can see that settles to the bottom. It switches the iron-bound phosphorus to aluminum-bound, which is, again, what we're really targeting here. It'll hold on to that phosphorus even when the dissolved oxygen is absent. The cost of phosphorus removal per kilogram is very low compared to a lot of other methods that may be done in the watershed. Not to say that those shouldn't, just this is a very cost-effective measure compared to those. It's generally a few $100s per kilogram of phosphorus removed, whereas some of these other methods are thousands or tens of thousands of dollars per kilogram of phosphorus removed. And again, it works immediately. It's effective for a really long time, at least on the phosphorus that you control when you do the treatment. And then if you also, at the same time, control those external sources of phosphorus, so septic, stormwater, you buy yourself more time with this alum treatment and can hopefully tie things over long enough that you are able to maintain water quality until those other improvements kick in. Typically, what we would recommend for a pond like this where alkalinity is low, which is really the buffering capacity, is buffering the treatment as well with something called sodium aluminate. So there would be a second chemical added as well, and that would be added separately, part of the same treatment, but as a separate application, not mixed in with the alum.
Are these chemicals harmful to anything? I mean, when you say chemical, people react.
They do, yeah. No, in their concentrated form, yeah, you don't want to handle them without protection, and there's certain safety rules about how the application works. But generally speaking, once they're in the pond environment, if you follow what we've learned over the last 20, 30 years of doing alum treatments, because some of the ones that were done early on were not done well, they're very safe to use. They do require monitoring. They do require things like this, like a dosing study, so that you know what you're putting in there, why, how much you need. You'll see here for safety and also for just to kind of see how things go and to also address the fact that we have a lot of organic phosphorus. We're actually recommending not doing it as one treatment in Santuit Pond. We're recommending splitting it into a couple of different treatments. So I hope that answered your question.
And what is the price point on the, doing both the alum treatment and the sodium aluminate together? You said $100 for the alum, I think.
$100 per kilogram of phosphorus removed, yeah. So it all depends on how much you treat and how much you put in. The market is shifting on alum, as it has been for many things in the last year or two. Prices have been going up. Before that, prices have been pretty stable. So that's kind of the hard nut to crack right now. Is it really depends on the timing of when this treatment would be done.
Do you do it in the spring, or do you wait till you get a high number and then put it in?
Well, so we're targeting
When do you do
the sediment phosphorus. So we really, even though it will have water quality benefits to the water column, we're really trying to target the phosphorus within the sediments. So, but the timing is important. So this would happen either early in spring before the herring run, or after summertime in the autumn. Essentially, you want kind of cool conditions, but not too cold, so that you get a good treatment. The flocculant forms well. You minimize your potential impacts during the treatment, and you have good conditions for the treatment, essentially.
How do these chemicals affect the herring and other fisheries?
Well, the goal is to have them be a beneficial impact. So if they're applied appropriately, there really should be no significant negative impacts. And we've monitored these kinds of treatments in a number of other ponds across Massachusetts, including here on the Cape. Haven't had any fish kills or anything like that. Ultimately, we know the algae are producing or are getting to levels that are out of control. The algae are capable, especially the cyanobacteria in particular, capable of producing toxins. So we want to address that, which could impact both fish health as well as human health. The goal of this is to improve the water quality and make it a better place, better habitat for fish, as well as a better place for people to recreate and live on. So this is sort of the plan that we've come up with. I know it's a long presentation. Just kind of want to hammer home the point that, reduced phosphorus letting from the sediments is going to equal cleaner water. This is a way to do it. It's been done lots of different places. Like I said, it's been 12 treatments in the last decade on the Cape. They've all been successful. Some are more successful than others. Obviously, we want to try to make this as successful as possible if the town were to decide to do this. And that's kind of why we've taken this approach of really looking at the sediments and doing the science, doing the math, and getting a dose that we think is appropriate. One of the problems we usually encounter with these sediment dose alum treatments is they're usually underdosed. If they don't last very long, that's usually the problem, is they weren't dosed heavily enough. The Monpont ponds, I don't know if people are familiar with them, up in Halifax, they did have a program there where they did low-dose treatments for several years, and it sort of was improving the water quality, but just for a limited point of time. And so they sort of started accelerating the rate at which they did the applications and got better and better results. So that was almost like an underdosing by design kind of situation. They had some different sort of limitations on what they could do here than we might here at Santuit Pond. But ultimately, they ended up getting to that high dose number over a series of applications.
But I mean, this is still, it's a Band-Aid, right? I mean, because the alum, if I understand it, it eventually releases it, so it's a perpetual treatment?
The phosphorus that the alum captures is essentially, now, not 100%, but essentially locked up for good.
Wow.
It doesn't stop the deposition of new phosphorus. So, and you're going to have that. Even if you stopped everything in the watershed, you'd have rain coming in, right? There's some phosphorus in the rain. There's other sources like leaves falling into the pond. That's natural. It's going to happen. What you really want to do is slow down that rate of external loading. So the human-caused sources, right? The stormwater and the septic, those are the things we keep hitting on too. That's great. If you stopped those at 0 today, you'd still probably have cyanobacteria blooms in the pond because you hadn't fixed the internal loading. So this is going to fix the internal loading for now. If you have more sediment with high phosphorus deposited on top of what we put down to basically trap what's there now, you'll eventually develop that same problem again. But this buys you time to sort of have that transition.
Could you estimate the cost, what it would do to do Santua Pond?
This is going to be several $100,000.
Several hundred?
Yeah. To do it at this level.
Are you aware of any infrastructure money that's out there for stuff like this?
Well, the 319 grant has funded, which is a federal money that comes to the state, has funded these kinds of projects in the past. They've actually funded the Monpont Ponds one that I was talking about earlier. So that's a pretty clear source of funding, especially if we have a watershed-based plan in place for Santuit and are planning to take care of the watershed phosphorus. Did you want to add anything else, Ashley?
And we currently have a watershed-based plan that will eventually get approved, and we can leverage that at the federal level through 319 funds and potentially get this paid for.
That would be great.
Any questions?
Yeah, so Matt, it sounds like it's going to be a little of everything to kind of clean it up. So last week, I also took a tour of the wastewater testing facility here in Mashpee. And treating phosphorus is like a big challenge. Everything is just all about, talking about nitrogen and, it's taking care of that. But there was a couple systems out there, and I know this might sound crazy, but you keep mentioning aeration. Every other slide mentions aeration. So they had a couple systems out there that one of them got, I don't remember exact names, but it was like an iron core plates, and maybe Mary can.
It was an iron electrode.
So
which put iron ions into the water, which caused the phosphorus to precipitate up.
So in my crazy mind, I'm thinking, okay, could you pump the water like as if it's, because the pond is not that big compared to Mashpee, Wakeby, or other larger ponds. So could you not make this like a large filtering system, like a pool, and basically aerate the water? And I don't care if you want to put a big fountain in the middle, I don't care. And then run this through either a Fuji system, which is another one of Fuji's, which is one of the two best systems out there right now from what I got from the presentation, or the iron core plates, and basically running it through these systems and basically filtering the water. I mean, you mentioned aeration, it's doing this. I'm not saying don't do the alum. I'm saying do the alum. This doesn't seem to be, this doesn't look like hundreds of thousands of dollars. In fact, they were talking about individual systems of $5,000. So could we do a system for $100,000 that is going to be worked as a constant filtering system? It's food for thought. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I recommend take a tour of Brian's facility. It's only down the street. I come back with a lot more questions, but again, treating phosphorus, those two are the two highest, furthest down the road as far as and very favorable results so far.
I guess to sort of answer that in general, 'cause I'm not necessarily familiar with those specific systems and how they would be applied to the pond, but if we take any system like that that's used for wastewater, and a lot of these ideas originally did come from wastewater or from water treatment, it's usually a question about scaling it up. And scaling it up to a pond this size, where something has to run all the time, every day of the year, and especially at night, when you have these dissolved oxygen lapses and these releases of phosphorus from the sediments, it's a lot of energy and a lot of machinery to try to do the trick. Theoretically, it could be done, but you need a lot of equipment and you're going to be spending a lot of money on operations and maintenance. The Solar Bee circulators that are out there now are doing something. We don't really have great measurements in terms of how effective they've been specifically for improving water quality. It seems like they may be doing something, but it's just not doing enough. And that was a significant investment in and of itself.
That's why I was saying, I mean, but I look at the solar bees and again, I live 400 yards from Santuit Pond. So, I don't know how much aeration those solar bees are doing. You can, kayak right up next to it and, I mean, seriously. In Florida, what do? They put a big fire hydrant in the middle of the pond and shoot it up, and there's aeration right there. And it's also, from my understanding, it also creates a hole where the water lands down from the water pressure. And one of the, Dr. House mentioned before, the bad sediment will seek its lowest point, if I'm correct. So this could solve two problems. It'll basically build a deep hole in the middle, and the bad sediment will kind of go to it, and maybe we can go in there and vacuum it all up. I don't, I mean, I'm a little frustrated right now, so.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Michaela.
That we're done vacuuming. What's the next steps with this plan in your eyes? So we have a plan. Does your company continue to work through this to do the pricing and present us with kind of a management plan for it? Or what are next steps?
Right, so we did develop a dosing plan that we've got this map, we've got the rates, we know how many gallons would have to be applied of everything. Obviously, you can't do any of this without a permit, and you can't do any of it without funding. So I think those are the kind of the two things that would need to happen next. The permitting is not ridiculously difficult, but obviously requires some forethought. And again, the monitoring is really key here. We have to be very careful. We don't expect that a treatment like this would have any negative impacts, but we also want to not take anything for granted and make sure that it's done the right way. So typically with these kinds of projects, there's pre-treatment monitoring required that's collecting water quality immediately right up to the treatment itself. And then there's ongoing monitoring over the course of the treatment itself, where you actually have another boat following the treatment vessel, measuring pH, which is really the key thing to measure here, and that sort of thing. And then you have post-treatment monitoring of some sort that will then tell you, okay, well, what's the impact a week later or 2 weeks later? And then really, the proof will be in the pudding. What's the impact the year after and 2 years after?
Thank you.
I don't know, just throwing it out there, like, I really would love to see kind of the area get cleaned up as quickly as possible. I don't know if there's some sort of way of having a co-management agreement maybe with the tribe where they could pursue fish and wildlife funding or something, to where you could do the dredge on the southern portion as part of a habitat restoration project that isn't going to be detrimental to the fish down the stream. And then you do more of a chemical treatment on the northern portion where the contaminants and nutrients are, more toxic, and kind of to mitigate it so that you're hitting it from multiple angles, and so it's not such a huge cost on one area. Just throwing out some fire hydrant ideas, but something like that, or hitting the deeper areas, trying to partner with the Army Corps or whoever else you can, I guess would be just trying to consider some different approaches like John as well. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. Thank you for the work you're doing. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I have actually one more.
Tom, did you have a question?
No, the only question it wasn't a question, I was totally surprised. Those solar bees are still existing, and are they working, or you're smiling, you're not quite sure?
Yeah, we didn't really evaluate that specifically, but
That was a long time ago. It's got to be 10 years, if not more, that we bought those.
So they're doing something. That's the simple answer. They're providing oxygen to the bottom sediment. So you're not seeing them at the surface because they're trying to aerate the bottom, which is in turn preventing the phosphorus release from the sediment. That's the kind of the theory behind them. So they're worth keeping. We have them. They're doing something, but they're not solving the problem and making this area swimmable.
I'm impressed. It was just
Yeah.
a trial. It was just a shot in the dark, and they're somewhat effective. How effective, who knows?
And
That's good to hear.
I do remember there was one gentleman that came and I think he was volunteering what was it, the closed cell foam to try to capture cyano, and I don't know if it would help. That wouldn't help the sediment, that would be more specific to the cyano blooms.
Yeah, that's like treating the bloom itself when you
Yeah.
have an active bloom.
But the other thing I was considering, and I think I mentioned before, was, if there's some sort of hydroponic or agriculture that could be incorporated on there to where, there's plants or something that could suck the nutrients out of some of the shallow areas, and where you focus your attention on deeper areas where that's not viable, just for a more natural way of try to, pulling the contaminants out, the nutrients out, if anything like that, if there's
So
any
did-
technology
yeah.
out there.
So you're talking about like harvesting the vegetation?
Floating gardens, some sort of floating mechanism that is growing something that's pulling the nutrients, phosphorus has to feed something. And is there plant life that could help with the, so it's a more organic treatment? The chemicals scare me, I guess is my thing, even though they're used in some of the drinking water and things of that reservoirs and things. So, I'd much prefer a natural extraction of the nutrients. And how to go about that, I'm not sure. I'm really grasping at straws.
So what's unique to Santuit Pond is it has 2 invasive species right now of pond matter or weed. It's a variable leaf milfoil and fanwort. And if those aren't dealt with an algicide or a type of herbicide, that it'll take over the entire pond. So we
Gotcha.
have that issue too at Santuit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Ashley, one more quick question, sorry. Last time we had the potential of alum, it got shot down at town meeting. So at that time, did we have funding for the alum treatment?
At that time, the funding was allocated for stormwater improvements and for a feasibility study for aluminum sulfate. And this is the completion of the feasibility study, which didn't cost the town any of those funds that were allocated. We used all of those funds for stormwater improvements. So those funds could potentially be used as a match moving forward with any type of permitting efforts or remediation efforts.
Sounds like an eligible CPC application for recreation purposes. Just throwing it out there, recreation, conservation, all that kind of thing. Sounds like ample funding over there. Look forward to an application. Just throwing it out there.
I think it's more than throw it out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just also wanted to sort of acknowledge the whole, the project partners and the consultant team who helped put this together and brought us on board to help with this specific portion of it. So thanks to everybody.
You did a great job.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very informative.
It's not easy to explain that.
Next, we have discussion and approval of the following resignations and appointments. The resignation of the Mashpee Community Garden Advisory Committee, John Cotter. Term expires June 30th, 2023. At this time, I'd accept a motion to accept the resignation of John Cotter from the Mashpee Community Garden Advisory Committee.
So moved. Regrettably.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? If we would, include the letter thanking him for his service, I'd accept, we'll take the vote. Carol?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom? Michaela?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Motion to accept the resignation of John Cotter is unanimous and approved. Cape Cod Commission, Mashpee Representative, Ernest Vigilio. At this time, I'd accept a motion to appoint Ernest Vigilio to continue serving as the Mashpee representative on a Cape Cod Commission for a term that runs from April 25th, 2023 through April 24, 2026.
Motion approved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. The motion to appoint Ernest Vigilio as the Cape Cod Commission representative is unanimously approved by all present. For the Board of Registrars, we have Ernest Vigilio for the term expiring March 30th, 2025. At this time, I'd accept a motion to nominate
So moved.
Ernest
Second.
Vigilio as for the Board of Registrars. First and second, I heard a first and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
Yes.
John? Tom?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well.
What
That
would we do
motion's,
without Ernie?
I know.
he's everywhere but the electric chair. We got Yvonne Courtney for Board of Registrars. I'd accept a motion to appoint Yvonne Courtney to the Board of Registrars for the term of, that expires March 31st, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Motion to appoint Yvonne Courtney is unanimous by all present. Conservation Commission, Member at Large, Sandra Godfrey, for the term of June 30th, 2023. I'd accept a motion to appoint Sandra Godfrey as a Member at Large to the Conservation Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Hearing a first and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And Michaela?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Motion to appoint Sandra Godfrey is unanimous by all present. Communications and, hello, Sandra, welcome back. Communications and correspondence. We did have several related to tonight's public hearing. I think everyone got those in their packets. Old business?
We also had one related to new construction. Sorry.
Was there another one?
Yeah. On the main street. My brain is tired. We received a letter via mail about new construction off of Quiniquisette. Can't find it.
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
I don't remember getting that.
I'm not seeing it.
I see a lot of it. I mean,
Aldino's.
Can we include it in the
Next week.
packet for the next meeting? I'm not,
Did you get it, something?
what letter are you discussing?
new construction as a correspondence off of Quiniquisette,
It's up near Quiniquisette.
up by
Sorry,
Quiniquisette,
I
there was
can't
some
fi-
sort
I
of
can't find it.
correspondence?
Is that something that came in the mail to each individual selectman?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't remember
Then that
receiving
was,
it.
Was that
that was the letter.
involved tree clearing or something?
Yes.
Severe, someone's
Somebody wanted us.
Someone's very disappointed about the amount of tree clearing.
Oh, the tree.
I
There was
remember something
nobody
about
signed
that.
that document. There was no name on it.
Yeah.
It just came out of
Yeah,
the
we
blue.
don't usually respond to.
That one, okay. It has been the policy of the board for, I don't know how many years, we will not distribute anonymous letters.
Okay.
So if that is to discontinue or change, then the board needs to direct me, because we're not going to take anonymous letters and distribute them to the board as a matter of practice. And that's a long-standing practice.
Nope, sounds good.
No problem with me on that
Totally
one.
fine.
I just didn't know which one it was. And if it's the anonymous one, we put the kibosh to that because
Sure.
it wasn't signed. If they leave a name, then it's going to get distributed.
Yep.
But if they are anonymous, it's not worth the paper it's written on.
Fair enough.
Great.
Old business?
I'm good.
None, new business, none. Discussion and a possible approval of amending Select Board Policy 81, public participation at public meetings.
Yes, as a direct result of the Supreme Judicial Court decision relative to public comments at public meetings, I just wanted to have council review our policy, our existing policy, which is 081, I believe. And as a direct result of his review, there were some minor modifications. There were a couple amendments, a couple deletions, a couple revisions, nothing substantial, but what you have before you is a policy that can be approved as amended, or I should say as revised, and it will be consistent with this decision. And obviously, in summary, when somebody is speaking at public comments, the chair can obviously control the reasonable time, place, and manner of those comments. Like we have a limit here on time. That is going to pass constitutional muster. What isn't is if somebody wants to just be obnoxious. That we have to accept as an obnoxious person. So if somebody wants to get up and say, "We suck," or whatever the case may be, then
They can.
unfortunately, they can do that.
And they can personal attack. and
Well,
yes.
if somebody starts threatening, criminally threatening, violence, no. That's
get it.
crossing the line, and you can rule them out of order, and they can be removed. But in terms of saying that we're incompetent, or, you know, all of the buzzwords that
attack.
some people may sometimes think about, but have hesitated to say, they can say it without us really being able to correct them or stop them, or telling them that if they don't cease and desist, that they are going to be removed. We can't do that. So essentially, that's it in a nutshell, but if you approve this as revised, we are conforming to the decision. And I should also point out, and I hope that all other chairs of committees, commissions, and councils and boards realize this, you still have to be recognized, and you can't interrupt, and you can't be disruptive. The decision applies specifically to public comments. If there was somebody in the audience right now who just got up and started talking, and you said, "Please stop," and they didn't, that's out of order, and that person can be told to cease and desist, and if they fail to do so, then they can be ruled out of order and removed. May have to take a recess and call the police to remove them, but nevertheless, the point is, that person can still be controlled. So anyway, my suggestion is to approve this as revised unless you have specific questions. And if you do, then I can take them back to council and get clarity, and we can go from there. And you could table this, and we could discuss it at your next meeting.
So I was, my understanding is that it would apply to both public comment and public hearings, as a facilitator to control through, calling out of order and things of that nature.
Public hearings too.
I think that's-
I think it's-
For me, though, I'd much rather preferred, I'd rather table it for now and then look at the red line version, just so I fully understand, like, what the comparative,
Absolutely.
comparatively, what the changes are. It would be easier for me than, looking at this and looking at it on the computer, the old version. It just simplify things for
And
me.
Mr. Chair, there's no rush on this. So I respectfully request it be tabled. We'll get you the red line version, draw the comparisons. If you have any questions, we'll get them answered by council. If you don't have any questions or any further comments, then we can maybe get this approved at your next meeting.
No, that sounds fine. Yeah, is everyone
That's fine.
okay with that?
Motion to table.
Second.
Hearing first and second on the motion to table this item. Any discussion? Hearing none. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carol? I'm a yes as well. Additional topics. Liaison reports. Had a significant water quality update. Town manager updates.
Yes, the Leclerc Village Affordable Housing Project groundbreaking Wednesday, May 31st, 2023 at 10:30 a.m. And I need a date from you, Mr. Chair, and the board for the joint meeting regarding the Select Board and Board of Health, either May 8th or May 22nd, if that works for you.
And you said May 31st for the groundbreaking?
May
31st.
8th? May 8th?
May 31st for the groundbreaking.
Oh, I'm sorry, for the groundbreaking?
Groundbreaking is the 31st of May?
Correct.
Wednesday, the 31st at 10:30 a.m. And for the joint meeting, we're looking at either May 8th or May 22nd,
8th or the 22nd?
if that works.
The members of the board want to take into consideration the May 8th and the other date,
22nd.
May 8th and the 22nd?
I'm good with
And then- and
either
then
one.
I am.
Respond to
Yeah.
the town manager directly?
I'm good, either one.
I don't know what's
as well.
happening with me.
Yeah, I gotta look.
Yes.
That stuff.
It's a Monday, right?
I'm good,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
It's a Monday, so I mean,
Monday.
I thought they were, let me
Yes,
just.
they are.
Mondays.
I got it right here. They are.
All right,
I'm good.
yes.
my Mondays are locked, so.
Okay, so I'll respond via email.
That's
But,
fine. And last but not least, obviously, it goes without saying that there's an awful lot of traffic detours right now in the town of Mashpee. If you are getting detoured out of 151 and you think you're out of it and you try to go down 28, you're going to get detoured there. All I can say is bear with it and it'll be over soon.
There was no complaints today.
We did not field one complaint.
I feel that,
And one of the select board members said that it went really smooth. She went through the detour. So all I can say is, the worst of it will be over soon.
I got two for you.
You heard two complaints?
Did you?
That's no big, I mean, they were coming.
on the detours?
They had to go through 151, then they went through, yeah, so
It's been advertised.
How long's the 151 gonna last?
Couple
A
of
week on that
days.
one?
Yeah, another week.
All right. Just so we know.
The rest of the
Yeah.
week.
I went to the town dump today, no problem.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
It's fine.
You go down, then you come back the other way.
But that's it.
Okay.
So with that, I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
First and second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.